The autumn sun was dying over Blackwood Ridge when the question came. Thomas sat on the porch beside his grandfather watching gold light bleed across the Montana Valley below. At 20 years old, he wore the weight of his draft notice like a stone in his pocket. 1 week until he shipped out. 1 week until Korea became more than headlines and radio reports. Ethan Blackwood was 91 years old. His hands were gnarled oak, his face a map of hard winters and harder choices. He rocked slowly in his chair, saying nothing, watching everything. 7 decades had passed since he'd fought in a war. The Sioux bullet still lodged near his thigh bone reminded him every morning a souvenir from the Indian Wars of 18th when he'd been a young cavalry scout. "Grandpa," Thomas said finally, his voice cracked like kindling, "did you ever get scared when you were in the cavalry in the Indian Wars?" The old man didn't answer right away. He never did. Words had weight in the Blackwood family. You didn't waste them on empty air. "Always scared," Ethan said at last. "Every single day, but not of dying." Thomas turned to look at him. "Then what were you scared of?" Ethan's eyes were still sharp, still blue as mountain ice. "Scared of not being worthy. Scared of failing the people who needed me to stand." The young man looked down at his hands. They seemed too soft, too clean. "How do you know when you've done the right thing?" "You don't, not always." Ethan stopped rocking. The chair creaked one last time and went still. "But there was one time." He nodded toward the old cabin, rebuilt but standing on the same foundation. "Winter of 1906, I thought I was dead already, not my body, my soul." "That's the year you met Grandma Catherine." A smile touched the old man's weathered face. "That's the year she saved my life, though she thought it went the other way." He shifted in his chair, settling in like a man preparing for a long haul. "Let me tell you about the Scream Boy, about a woman with 7 children, about how a coward found his reason to live." Thomas leaned forward. Ethan's eyes went distant, looking back through 50 years. "It started," the old man said, with 7 years of silence. Montana Territory, December 1906. Ethan Blackwood woke before dawn because dawn was the only thing he trusted anymore. The cabin was cold. His breath hung white in the darkness. He lay still on the narrow cot in the loft, listening to nothing, feeling nothing, being nothing. This was living now. This was what passed for peace. He dressed slowly, favoring his left leg. The bullet wound was old, 30 years old, but Montana winters made it sing. Some mornings he could barely walk. This morning was one of those. The Sioux warrior who'd put that bullet in him was long dead, killed in the same skirmish. But the lead remained a permanent reminder that death had passed him by once and might not be so generous again. The cabin had one room, stone fireplace built with rocks he'd hauled from the creek bed, wooden table hewn from lodgepole pine, 2 chairs, though he'd never needed the second. Shelves lined one wall packed with books he'd read so many times the words had worn smooth in his mind. Shakespeare, Whitman, a battered copy of the Bible his mother had given him, above the loft where he slept, below the root cellar where he kept meat and supplies enough to outlast any storm. He'd built this place with his own hands 7 years ago. Built it to be alone in, built it to forget in, built it to die in, slowly, one empty day at a time. Ethan lit the fire with practiced efficiency, kindling first dry pine needles and birch bark, small logs split from seasoned aspen, larger ones once the flame caught, and spread thick rounds of Douglas fir that would burn for hours. He watched it grow, watched shadows dance on log walls, watched another day begin that looked exactly like the last. 7 years since he'd spoken to another human soul. 7 years since he'd wanted to. He pulled on his coat, heavy wool lined with rabbit fur. He'd tanned himself and took his rifle from above the door. Springfield model, 1873. Single shot, but he'd never needed more than one. The weapon was an extension of his arm, now as natural as breathing. He'd carried it through the Indian campaigns, through the years after, through the long climb up this mountain to nowhere. Outside, the world was gunmetal gray. Snow lay 3 feet deep already, and winter was just getting started. December in Montana Territory meant months of cold still ahead, blizzards that could bury a man alive, temperatures that could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. His breath came in white plumes. The cold bit through his coat like teeth. Ethan checked his trap line by memory, not sight. He knew every tree, every rise, every hidden drop on this mountain. It was his kingdom, his prison, his tomb. The traps were set in a wide circle, each one positioned where game trails crossed, where rabbits ran, where the foxes hunted. Snowshoe hare mostly this time of year, their coats turned white to match the drifts. Sometimes a pine marten valuable for its pelt. Rarely a lynx, though he'd caught 2 last winter. 4 rabbits in the traps today. Good. Their bodies frozen solid in the night cold. A fox dead its russet pelt worth money if he ever went to town. Which he wouldn't. He reset the traps with hands that no longer felt the cold fingers moving by habit, and memory packed the game in his canvas sack and started back. The sky was darkening again by mid-morning. Storm coming? He could smell it on the wind, that peculiar metallic scent that preceded heavy snow. Could feel it in the pressure behind his eyes, in the way his old bullet wound throbbed. Big one. Maybe the biggest yet this season. He thought, good. Let it come. Let it bury the world. Let it bury me with it. Back at the cabin, he skinned the rabbits with his hunting knife, the blade worn thin from 3 decades of use. Hung the meat in the cold room to cure safe from scavengers. The fox pelt he stretched on a wooden frame and set aside. Waste nothing. Need nothing. Feel nothing. This was the way he'd chosen. This was the path to peace, or what passed for it. By noon, the wind was howling. By one, snow fell so thick he couldn't see the tree line 50 yards away. The world disappeared into white chaos. Ethan sat by the fire with a book open in his lap, not reading, just staring at words that might as well have been in a foreign language. The pages swam before his eyes, meaningless marks on yellowed paper. He thought about Elizabeth. He tried not to, but some days the memories came whether he wanted them or not. Her laugh bright as morning sunshine. The way she hummed while cooking old hymns her mother had taught her. Her letters during the cavalry years, pages and pages of hope and love and faith that he'd come home alive. She'd waited for him through 3 years of Indian fighting, through the news of men killed, through the long silences when the mail couldn't reach the frontier posts. And Anna, sweet Anna, 3 years old, dark hair like her mother, blue eyes like him. She'd called him Papa, and the word had been magic, had made him feel like something more than a man who'd spent his youth killing for the army. Winter of 18, the fever came like a thief in the night. It took Elizabeth first. 3 days of burning and shaking, and him sitting beside her bed in their little house in Helena, helpless, useless, watching her slip away despite every prayer he knew. Then Anna, his baby, his little girl. She lasted 2 days, called for him at the end, called for her papa in a voice so weak he could barely hear it. He'd held her until she went cold, held her for hours after unable to let go. He'd buried them when the ground thawed that spring, stood over 2 graves in the Helena cemetery, and felt something inside himself die that wouldn't ever come back. The part that hoped, the part that loved, the part that believed life was worth living. Then he'd walked up this mountain and never came down. The fire crackled, the wind screamed. Ethan sat motionless, a statue of a man dead in all the ways that mattered. That's when he heard it. The scream, not wind, not animal, human, female, raw and primal and desperate, the sound of something breaking, the sound of a mother watching her children die. It cut through the storm like a blade through flesh. Ethan was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. His blood cold for 7 years suddenly ran hot. His hands numb for so long suddenly shook. Something primal in that scream reached down into the dead place inside him and dragged it back to life. He grabbed his rifle, yanked open the door. The blizzard hit him like a wall of knives. Wind tore at his face, snow blinded him. Cold tried to drive him back inside where it was warm and safe and empty. He ran anyway. The scream came again, weaker, dying. He pushed through snow that reached his thighs. His bad leg protested pain lancing up from the old wound to his hip. The Sioux bullet ground against bone with every step. He ignored it. Pain meant he was still alive. Pain meant someone else might be too. 50 yards, 100. The world was white chaos. He couldn't see 10 feet ahead, but he could hear. Another scream, fainter, now fading like hope dying. He pushed harder. Then he saw them. Dark shapes against white snow. Too many shapes, too small. A woman on her knees clutching something to her chest. Children. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7 children scattered around her like broken dolls, half buried in snow, not moving. "Hey!" His voice cracked from disuse, rough as gravel. "Hey!" The woman's head snapped up. Wild eyes, desperate eyes, the eyes of something hunted and cornered and ready to die fighting. Ethan reached her in 3 strides, dropped to his knees. The impact jolted his bad leg, but he barely felt it. "Are they alive?" Her voice was barely there, torn raw from screaming. "Please, they're alive, please!" He looked at the bundle in her arms. A baby, lips blue, no movement, so small, so still. His heart dead for 7 years, twisted like a knife had found it. "Give her to me." "No." She clutched the baby tighter. "She's mine." 10 minutes, that's what she's got. Maybe less. His voice came out harder than he meant. "You want her to live. Give her to me now." Something in his tone cut through her panic. Her arms loosened. He took the baby. God, so small, so cold, skin like old wax lips the color of frozen blueberries. For one terrible moment, he was back in 1899, holding Anna, feeling her go still in his arms. He shoved the memory down. No time. No time for ghosts. No time for grief. Only time for action. "Can you walk?" The woman tried to stand. Her legs gave out. She fell hard, tried again, fell again. Her body was shutting down, hypothermia stealing her strength. "The children," she gasped. "My children. Daniel." One of the larger shapes moved. A boy, 16, maybe 17, struggling to his feet, slipping in the deep snow, fighting to stand. "Daniel," Ethan's voice cracked like thunder across the white wasteland. "You hear me?" "Yes, sir." The boy's voice shook, but his eyes were clear, scared but not broken. "Anyone who can walk, get them walking. Anyone who can't, carry them. My cabin's half a mile up the mountain. Follow my tracks. Don't stop. Don't sit down. You sit down, you die. Understand?" "Yes, sir." Ethan turned back to the woman. She was crawling now, reaching for children who weren't moving. "Alice, Alice, baby, wake up. Peter, Peter, please." He grabbed her arm, hauled her up. She was heavy, solid, a body that had carried and nursed 7 children and showed every mile. But her eyes, God, her eyes burned with something all the cold in the world couldn't kill. Fierce, unbroken, still fighting. "Your girl's breathing." He pointed to the baby in his arms. "That boy there's moving. But we stay here talking, none of them make it. Move. Now." She looked at him. Through the snow and wind, something passed between them. Recognition. 2 people who'd lost too much. 2 people still fighting. 2 people who refused to quit even when quitting would be easier. "I can't feel my legs." "Don't need to feel them, just use them." He put his arm around her waist and started walking, supporting her weight, dragging her forward. The half-mile back was the longest of his life. She walked like the dead. 1 foot, then another. Mechanical. Empty. No thought, just movement. Twice she stumbled. Twice he caught her. The 3rd time she went down hard, face first into a drift. "Leave me." Her voice was flat, defeated. "Take the baby. Take the children. Leave me." "Shut up." "I mean it. I'm too heavy. I'm slowing you down. They need you. I don't matter." "I said shut up." He dragged her 10 yards before she found her feet again. Found some reserve of strength he didn't know existed. The baby was pressed against his chest inside his coat. He couldn't tell if she was still breathing. Her tiny body was so cold, so still. He kept moving. Had to keep moving. Behind them, the children stumbled through the snow. Daniel carried a small boy on his back, the child's arms wrapped around his neck. An older girl, the one called Alice, half-dragged 2 smaller ones forward. Another girl, maybe 11, pushed a crying child ahead of her. A 6-year-old stumbled along calling for mama. 7. 7 children. 7 reasons this woman refused to quit. The cabin appeared through the white like salvation, like a lighthouse in a storm. "There?" Ethan shouted over the wind. "Doors unlocked. Everyone inside. Now." Daniel reached it first, kicked it open, herded his siblings through. Ethan dragged the woman inside and lowered her to the floor. She collapsed, shaking so hard her teeth rattled, violent tremors racking her whole body. "The baby." She reached for him with hands that looked like claws. "Please, the baby." He pulled the little girl from his coat, limp, cold, skin like old wax. Then she whimpered. The woman's sob nearly broke him, a sound of such relief, such desperate gratitude, it cut through his carefully built walls like they were paper. She's alive. His throat was tight, cold as hell, but alive. He carried the baby to the fire. Behind him, chaos. Children crying, coughing, stumbling. A small voice asking for mama. Another one screaming. Water dripping from melting snow. The smell of wet wool and fear. Daniel. He didn't turn around. Couldn't. Had to focus on keeping the baby warm. You're in charge. Wet clothes off everyone. Blankets in that chest by the wall. Anyone shivering. Good. Anyone stop shivering closest to the fire. Water's heating on the stove. Snow from outside melted. Warm liquid as fast as you can. Not hot. Warm. Yes, sir. The boy moved like a soldier. Thank God. Someone who could follow orders. Someone who understood urgency. The woman was trying to sit up. Stay down, Ethan ordered. My children. Being handled. Your boys got them. Focus on not dying. I'm fine. You're hypothermic and half-starved in 10 minutes from dead. Stay down. She stared at him, this stranger who'd pulled her from the snow, who held her baby like something precious, who commanded her children like he had the right. Who are you, Byam? Ethan. Ethan Blackwood. Why? He didn't answer. Didn't know the answer. Just said rest. We talk when you are not freezing. The next hour blurred together like a fever dream. Ethan moved through the cabin, checking for frostbite, forcing warm water into cold mouths, wrapping children in every blanket he owned. The older ones recovered fast, their young bodies resilient. The younger ones were harder. A boy 8 years old wouldn't stop shivering. Peter, they called him. His fingers had gone white at the tips, frostbite starting. Ethan rubbed them gently, careful not to cause more damage. A girl 6 kept asking for mama in a voice that got quieter each time. Mary was her name. Her toes were raw when Ethan peeled off her wet socks, the flesh angry red. And the baby little Grace, they called her, cried for 20 minutes before falling asleep against his chest, her tiny fist wrapped around his finger. He hadn't held a child in 7 years. By the time the storm eased, all 7 were wrapped in blankets around the fire, most sleeping, a few watching him with waiting, scared eyes. Daniel sat with his back against the wall, exhausted but still alert, still ready to act if needed. Alice had the younger ones organize Grace in her arms. Thomas, the 13-year-old, had finally stopped shaking. Helen, the quiet one, sat reading the spines of books on the shelf. Peter clung to his mother. Mary had fallen asleep sitting up. Mr. Quam, Mary found her voice again, small and tentative. What? Do you got a cow? No, why not? Don't need one, but she considered this with grave seriousness, her young mind trying to understand this strange man who lived alone. Mama says everyone needs something soft. From across the room, he heard the woman, he'd learned her name, was trying not to laugh. First time he'd heard laughter in 7 years. The sound was strange, alien, beautiful. Catherine May Sullivan finally stopped shaking near midnight. She sat propped against the wall, blanket around her shoulders, eyes fixed on her children, counting them. Always counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all breathing, all alive. A miracle she couldn't quite believe. They're going to be all right, Ethan said from where he sat tending the fire, adding logs, banking the coals, making sure the heat would last through the night. You don't know that. I've seen frostbite. I've seen hypothermia. Saw men freeze to death in the winter campaigns against the Sioux. Your children are cold and scared and hungry, but they're going to live. She turned to look at him. Firelight caught her face. She was heavy, round face, soft chin, a body that had carried and nursed 7 children and showed every mile. But her eyes, sharp, fierce, burning with something all the cold in the world couldn't kill. Catherine, she said. Catherine May Sullivan, Mrs. Sullivan, widow. Flat, matter of fact, 2 years now. He nodded, a woman alone with 7 children walking through a blizzard. Only one kind of story led to that. What happened? She was quiet. When she spoke, each word was measured, worn smooth from repetition. A story she'd told before, a story that defined her. Thomas was a miner. Cave-in took him. Paused, His family blamed me, blamed you for a cave-in, for being too much. The words came out bitter. Too big, too many children, too expensive to keep. His mother said I'd worked him to death. Said if I hadn't been so, she stopped. So what, fat? She laughed harsh and hollow. If I hadn't been so fat, so hungry, so much. If I'd been smaller, prettier, less, maybe he wouldn't have had to work so hard. Maybe he'd still be alive. Ethan felt something dark twist in his chest, anger, at people he'd never met, at a world that could look at this woman, this survivor, and see only burden. They threw us out, Catherine continued, her voice steady now, not crying, past tears. Middle of winter, 7 children and nowhere to go. Her hands twisted in the blanket. I tried to find work. I can cook better than anyone. My mother taught me in the big houses in Kentucky, but no one hires a woman with 7 children. My sister's husband said he wouldn't have all those brats under his roof, said I should give them to an orphanage. Let someone else deal with them. How long you been walking? 6 months. 6 months, with 7 children, through summer heat and autumn cold, and now winter's teeth. We go where there might be work. Stay until they tell us to leave. Keep moving, always moving. She looked at the fire. I heard there was a ranch north of here. Needed a cook, good money, regular work. We set out 3 days ago. Pause. In this weather. You didn't know the storm was coming. I didn't know. Her voice cracked for the first time. I just wanted to give them something. A home. A real home. Somewhere they could sleep in the same bed 2 nights running. Somewhere they could be children instead of refugees. She pressed her hand to her mouth. Somewhere I could stop failing them. You walked 40 miles in a blizzard, Ethan said quietly, and almost killed them. No, his voice was harder than he meant. You almost saved them. I just finished the job. She looked at him, tears on her face now finally tracking through the grime and exhaustion, but her jaw set hard. Why do you care? The question hung there. Why did he care 7 years of not caring? 7 years of walls and silence and making sure nothing ever touched him again. 7 years of choosing death over life, emptiness over pain. I had a wife, he heard himself say, and a daughter, Elizabeth and Anna. Catherine went still. Fever took them. Winter of 1880, 3 days apart. He stared into the flames. I sat there and watched them die. Helena Town doctor said there was nothing to be done. Diphtheria. Couldn't do a damn thing about it. Pause. Buried them when the ground thawed. Then walked up this mountain and never came down. 7 years. 7 years alone. That was the idea. That was the plan. Stay up here until I died. Figured it wouldn't take long. Man alone in these mountains, winter kills him eventually. She was quiet for a moment. Then you didn't answer my question. Why do you care what happens to us? He thought about it. The sound of her scream cutting through 7 years of silence. The way she'd clutched that baby even when her own body was shutting down. The way she'd kept crawling toward her children even when her body had nothing left. The way she refused to quit. Because you reminded me what it looks like, he said slowly. To fight for something. To refuse to quit. He met her eyes. I forgot what that looked like. Been up here so long, convinced myself that fighting was for fools. That caring was weakness. That the only smart thing was to not feel anything. You showed me I was wrong. I'm not strong. I almost killed my children by walking into that storm. You kept them alive for 6 months. You kept walking when anyone else would have laid down and died. You screamed into that storm because you refused to let it win. He leaned forward. I know what strength looks like, Mrs. Sullivan. I've seen it in cavalrymen and Indian fighters and men twice your size who carried wounded soldiers off battlefields. And I've never seen it like I see it in you. The tears fell freely now. She didn't wipe them away. They called me a burden, she said quietly. My whole life too big, too much, too many opinions, too many needs, too many children. My husband's family, my own family, everyone. Pause. Everyone I've ever known has looked at me and seen something they had to carry. Something heavy, something they wish they could put down. They were blind. They were honest. They were wrong. He said it hard, certain, like a fact, not an opinion. You're not a burden, you're a miracle. And anyone who can't see that doesn't deserve you. She laughed, broken and disbelieving. You don't even know me. I know enough, a small voice interrupted. Mary, the 6-year-old, stirred by the fire. Mama, I'm here, baby. Is Mr. Ethan our uncle now, like Uncle Jacob? Catherine looked at Ethan. Something passed between them. Too soon, too fast, too real, but undeniable. Maybe, Catherine said softly, if he wants to be. Maybe he is. Mary beamed and went back to sleep, satisfied with this answer. Ethan felt something crack in his chest, something he'd built walls around for 7 years, something he'd thought was dead and buried with Elizabeth and Anna. What happens now? Catherine asked after a long silence. The fire crackled. The wind outside had died to a whisper. He took a breath. The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't invited anyone anywhere in 7 years. Stay. She looked at him sharply. What? Stay here through the winter. The words came faster now. Cabin's not big enough for 9, but we'll make do. You cook, I hunt. The older boys help with traps. Daniel's strong, he can learn. Come spring, you'll have money. You can go wherever you want. You don't owe us anything. I know. You don't know us. I know enough. Why would you... She stopped, started again. Why would you take on this 7 children? A woman you just met, mouths to feed all winter, will use your supplies, will disturb your peace, will... Because turning you out would be wrong. He held her gaze. And I've done enough wrong things in my life, don't need to add more. She was quiet for a long time, looking at her children, counting them again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all safe, all warm, all breathing. They need walls, she said softly. They need warmth. They need to sleep in the same place 2 nights in a row. They need to stop running. Then give it to them. Stay. She turned back to him, eyes bright, hands shaking. Through the winter. Through the winter. Then you decide what comes next. No obligations, no debts, just time. She stood slowly, crossed the room until she was close enough to touch. Thank you, she said. I don't know if I can ever repay you for... Don't want repayment, just want breakfast. She laughed, a real laugh, warm and full and alive. The sound filled the cabin like sunshine. Breakfast, I can do that. Then we've got a deal. She extended her hand. He took it. Strong grip, calloused palm. The handshake of someone who'd learned to rely on nobody but herself. The handshake of a survivor. Deal, she said. They stood there a moment longer than necessary, neither wanting to break the contact. Then Catherine returned to her children, settling beside Mary, pulling the blanket tighter around the sleeping girl. Ethan watched her. This woman who'd walked through hell and kept walking, and felt something shift in his chest. Something he'd thought was dead. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Outside, the storm had stopped. The wind was silent. The world was wrapped in white. Inside, 7 children breathed softly around the fire. Tomorrow would bring questions, problems. A cabin too small and mouths to feed, and a life he hadn't planned for. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, the silence didn't feel like peace. It felt like loneliness. And he was tired of being lonely. 300 miles south, in a warm office above a Silver Creek saloon, a man named Marcus Whitmore read a telegram by lamplight. The words swam before his tired eyes. He'd been reading the same telegram over and over for an hour. Widow spotted heading north, mountain territory, trail gone cold in storm. Whitmore set down the telegram, lit a cigar with hands that shook slightly, smiled. But there was no warmth in it, just cold calculation. She thought she could run. They always thought they could run. But Marcus Whitmore hadn't built his empire by letting things slip through his fingers. The widow owed him. Her dead husband owed him. And those 7 children, those 7 mouths that needed feeding, they were leverage. Perfect leverage. He picked up a pen, wrote 2 words on a fresh telegram. Find her. Marshal Cole Stevens would handle the rest. Stevens always did. The first morning came cold and gray. Ethan woke before dawn, habit carved into bone from 7 years of solitude and 30 years before that of military life. He lay still for a moment listening. Something was different. Something was wrong. Then he heard it. Breathing. Not one breath but many. Small bodies shifting. A child's cough. The creak of floorboards under weight that wasn't his. He sat up slowly, looking down from the loft. 8 people slept around his fire. 8 lives he'd pulled from the snow. 8 reasons his quiet existence had just gotten very, very complicated. Catherine was already awake. She sat by the hearth, little Grace in her arms, rocking gently. Her eyes met his across the dim room. She nodded once, acknowledgement, gratitude, warning. We're here now. Things have changed. He climbed down the ladder. His bad leg protested every rung. The Sioux bullet ground against bone, sending sparks of pain up his thigh. You should be resting, he said quietly. Can't sleep. She looked down at Grace. The baby's color was better. Pink instead of blue. Keep thinking I'll wake up and she'll be cold again. She's warm now. I know. Catherine's voice caught. I know she is, but I can't stop checking. Can't stop making sure she's breathing. He moved to the stove, started building a fire for coffee. The familiar motion steadied him. Kindling first, then smaller logs, then the match, the flame, the slow catch, and spread. Ritual, routine, things he understood. The children, Catherine said behind him. How bad is the frostbite? Not as bad as it could be. Peter's got some on his fingers. The tips went white, but color's coming back. Mary's toes are raw, but nothing that won't heal with time and care. Thank God. Thank luck. He poured water into the coffee pot. Another hour out there, and we'd be having a different conversation. We'd be burying children come spring. She was quiet. He could feel her watching him, measuring him, trying to figure out what kind of man pulled strangers from blizzards and offered them shelter. Trying to figure out what he wanted, because men always wanted something. About last night, she started. You don't have to explain anything. I do. She shifted Grace to her shoulder. The baby made a small hum, settled back into sleep. What you offered, letting us stay. I need to know if you meant it. I need to know this isn't some, she stopped. Some what? Some arrangement, some expectation that She couldn't finish the sentence. Understanding hit him. No, nothing like that. You're safe here. Your children are safe here from the weather, from whoever's chasing you, and from me. She met his eyes, searching. I don't know if I can trust that. Men say a lot of things to women alone with children. Not all of them mean it. Fair point. He'd known men like that, had fought beside them in the cavalry, hated them then, hated them now. I meant it, he said. Through the winter, no obligations, no debts, no expectations beyond you cooking and me keeping you all alive. And what do you get? Breakfast, like I said. She almost smiled. That's not a fair trade. My cooking for 7 people's shelter and food for months. Didn't say it was fair, said it was the deal. Daniel stirred on the floor, then sat up abruptly, hand going to his side like he was reaching for something that wasn't there. A weapon maybe, or just checking that his siblings were still there. Easy, Ethan said. You're safe. The boy's eyes darted around the cabin, taking in the walls, the fire, his sleeping siblings. When he found his mother, his shoulders dropped, relief washing over his young face. Mama. I'm here, baby. The little ones. All here. All safe. Daniel looked at Ethan with that same measuring gaze his mother had. The boy had been carrying weight too long. 17 years old and trying to be the man of a family that kept getting knocked down. Trying to protect people he had no power to protect. Thank you, Daniel said, for what you did, for saving us. Don't thank me yet. Winter's long and I'm not easy to live with. Ask anyone in Silver Creek. They'll tell you Ethan Blackwood's a mean old hermit who ran to the mountains because he couldn't stand people. Are you mean? Ethan considered this. I'm honest. Some people can't tell the difference. Something passed between them. Respect, maybe. Recognition. An understanding that they were both men who'd seen hard things and survived. The others woke in a cascade. Alice, the 15-year-old first. She immediately started organizing the younger ones, a habit born of necessity. Then Thomas, 13, and trying to pretend he wasn't scared. Helen, 11, who went straight to the bookshelf. Peter, 8, who immediately went to his mother. Mary, 6, asking questions before her eyes were fully open. And Grace waking with a cry that quickly settled when Alice picked her up. Ethan watched chaos unfold in his cabin, children stepping over each other, Mary asking where the outhouse was, Peter clinging to Catherine's skirt, Grace crying, Thomas arguing with Alice about something, Helen already lost in a book. He should hate this. He'd spent 7 years building silence around himself, like armor, like walls, like a fortress. This was the opposite of silence. This was noise and need and complication and mess. But watching Catherine move through it, answering Mary's questions, soothing Grace, directing Daniel and Alice with quiet efficiency, untangling Thomas and Alice's argument with a few words, he didn't hate it. He didn't hate it at all. Breakfast, Catherine said, looking at him. Where are your supplies? He showed her the root cellar, down narrow steps into the cool darkness below the cabin. Shelves lined with bars of preserved vegetables from summers past, dried meat hanging from hooks, sacks of flour and cornmeal and beans, salt pork, lard, sugar, coffee, dried apples and wild berries. She surveyed it all with a critical eye, calculating, planning. This is what you've been living on. It's enough. It's barely enough for one. She was already calculating. He could see the wheels turning. For 9, we'll need more. A lot more. Protein especially. Growing children need meat. I'll hunt today. Check the trap line. In this weather, after a storm like that, storms past, snow's deep but passable, and the game will be moving, looking for food after being holed up. He grabbed his coat, his rifle. Daniel, you're with me. The boy stood immediately. Yes, sir. Daniel. Catherine started, but Ethan cut her off. He needs to learn the land if he's going to be useful, and I need someone to help carry whatever we catch. Strong back, working hands. He looked at her. He'll be fine. I've been tracking game in these mountains for 7 years. I know every trail, every den, every place the animals go. She hesitated, every instinct telling her to keep her children close, to never let them out of her sight. She'd already lost them once in that blizzard. The fear of losing them again was written across her face. But she nodded. Be careful, both of you. Ethan opened the door. The world outside was white and blinding. Snow piled in drifts that reached the windows, sculpted by wind into strange shapes. But the sky was clear, hard blue, infinite. The wind was still, temperature brutal but manageable if you dressed right and kept moving. Let's go, he said. Daniel followed him into the cold. They walked in silence for the first mile. Ethan moved carefully, testing the snow, finding the paths that would hold their weight, showing Daniel how to read the drifts, which ones were solid pack and which ones would collapse under you. Samuel kept pace, watching, learning. The boy was smart, picked things up fast, didn't ask unnecessary questions. You hunt much? Ethan finally asked. Some. Before Pa died, he was teaching me how to track, how to shoot, how to dress game. What happened to him? Cave-in, silver mine south of here. Daniel's voice was flat, practiced. He'd told this story before. Him and 40 other men, support timber gave way. They never got the bodies out. Mine owner said it was too dangerous to dig, just sealed the shaft and moved on. I'm sorry, don't be. You didn't kill him. The boy kicked through a drift. His family did, though. How do you figure? Worked him like a dough. 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. Paid him barely enough to feed us. When he tried to ask for better wages, they told him there were 100 men who'd take his job. So he kept working, kept going down into that hole every day. Daniel's voice was harder now. Kept going until the mountain killed him. Ethan said nothing, waited. Sometimes silence was the best way to get the whole story. That's what happened after he died. Daniel's voice was bitter. Uncle Jacob Pay's older brother, he took the house. Said Pa owed him money. Said he'd been supporting us for years and it was time to settle accounts. Said Mama could stay if she... He stopped. If she what? If she was nice to him. Ethan felt his jaw tighten. Your grandmother let that happen. Grandmother was the one who told him to do it. Daniel looked at Ethan directly. She said Mama was a curse. Said she'd eaten Pa alive with her appetites and her children. Said we'd all be better off dead than raised by a woman like that. 7 years alone hadn't made Ethan soft. But hearing what Catherine and her children had survived made something hot and dangerous rise in his chest. Not pity, anger, at people who could look at children and see burden instead of blessing. Your mother's not a curse. I know. She's stronger than anyone I've ever met, stronger than most cavalrymen I knew, and I knew some hard men. I know that too. Then you know why I let you stay. Daniel considered this. No, sir, I don't. Men don't help women like my mother, not without wanting something. What do you think I want? The boy met his eyes, steady, unafraid, 17 and already harder than he should be. I don't know yet, but if you hurt her, I'll kill you. I don't care how big you are, or how many guns you've got, or how many wars you've been in. I'll find a way. Ethan should have been angry, should have put this boy in his place, reminded him who was helping who. Instead, he almost smiled. Fair enough. They walked on. By noon, they'd checked a dozen traps, 4 rabbits frozen solid but intact, 2 squirrels, a fox with a pelt that would fetch good money come spring if Ethan ever went to town, which he wouldn't, but the pelt was valuable regardless. Ethan showed Daniel how to reset the traps, how to hide the scent of human hands, how to read the snow for tracks, the subtle depressions that showed where game had passed, how to move quiet enough that animals didn't spook, how to judge wind direction so your scent didn't carry. The boy learned fast, asked good questions, kept his mouth shut when there was nothing to say, didn't complain about the cold or the work. You'll do, Ethan said as they turned back toward the cabin. Sir, you're not useless. Most boys your age, they talk too much and think too little. Crow about what they can do instead of just doing it. You're the opposite. Daniel's face flushed with pride. Thank you, sir. Don't call me sir. Makes me feel old. I'm only 41, not ancient. What should I call you, Ethan? Just Ethan. The boy nodded. Ethan. They walked in easier silence after that. 2 men, 1 old one, finding a rhythm that worked. The smell hit them before they reached the cabin. Bread, fresh bread baking, and something else. Meat cooking, onions frying, herbs. The warm, rich scent of a real meal, not survival rations. Ethan pushed open the door and stopped. The cabin had transformed. The children were organized. Mary and Helen folding blankets, making neat piles. Thomas and Peter stacking firewood by the hearth. Alice stirring something at the stove. Grace sat in a basket near the fire, chewing on a wooden spoon and babbling happily. And Catherine stood at the center of it all, flour on her apron, hair pulled back in a simple braid, commanding her army of children with quiet efficiency like a general who'd fought this battle 1,000 times. Daniel, hang the rabbits outside to bleed. Ethan, wash your hands. Food's almost ready. He blinked. How did you? Found your flour, your lard, your dried apples, your salt pork. She was already turning back to the stove, stirring, tasting, adjusting. You had everything I needed, just not organized right. I had it organized. You had it thrown in boxes and baskets and bins. That's not organization, that's giving up. Daniel made a sound that might have been a laugh. Ethan shot him a look. Something funny. No, sir. Ethan, nothing at all. They ate together. The table was too small for 9 people, so the younger ones sat on the floor with their plates making a game of it. The food was simple. Rabbit stew with onions and carrots from the root cellar, biscuits light and fluffy, dried apples stewed with honey and cinnamon. But it was the best meal Ethan had eaten in 7 years. Real food. Cooked with care. Eaten with company. This is good, he said halfway through his second helping. This is basic. Catherine shook her head. Wait until I have proper supplies. Fresh butter, eggs, real vegetables instead of dried and preserved. Then I'll show you good cooking. Where'd you learn to cook like this? My mother, she worked in a big house in Kentucky before she married my father. Churchill Estate, one of the tobacco plantations. She was head cook there, managed a kitchen that fed 30 people 3 times a day. Catherine looked at her own hands. Rough, chapped, strong. She said the only power a poor woman has is in her hands. What she can make, what she can do. She taught me everything she knew. She taught you well. She taught me to survive, to make something from nothing, to feed people even when there's not enough. Mary tugged at Ethan's sleeve. Mr. Ethan. What? Can I call you Uncle Ethan? The question hit him somewhere soft, somewhere he'd thought was dead and buried. Why would you want to do that? Because you saved us, and you let us stay, and you don't yell like other men. Uncle Jacob yelled all the time. Made Mama cry me. She considered this very seriously. Also, I never had a good uncle. Just Uncle Jacob, and he was mean. Hit Daniel once, made Alice do all the work. You're not mean. Mary, Catherine's voice was sharp. Don't bother Mr. Blackwood. She's not bothering me. Ethan looked at the little girl, 6 years old, missing a front tooth, a scatter of freckles across her nose, looking at him like he'd hung the moon and stars. You can call me whatever you want, Mary. Uncle Ethan it is. Something cracked in his chest, something he'd built walls around for 7 years, something that felt like the foundations of his carefully constructed isolation starting to crumble. Uncle Ethan, he repeated it quietly. All right. The days settled into rhythm. Ethan rose before dawn, checked traps, hunted when weather allowed. Daniel went with him most days, learning fast, growing stronger, learning to read the forest, to move quietly, to think like the animals he tracked. The boy had a natural eye for it, better than Ethan's in some ways. Younger eyes, sharper instincts not yet dulled by age and injury. Catherine ran the cabin like a general running a campaign. Meals appeared on time, regular as clockwork. Clothes got mended. The younger children were kept busy with tasks that made them feel useful, chores assigned by age and ability. She organized his supplies, cleaned spaces he'd forgotten existed, and somehow made the small cabin feel bigger than it was. Alice became Catherine's right hand, 15 years old but carrying herself older, cooking, cleaning, managing the little ones when her mother needed rest. She was good with Grace, patient with Mary's endless questions, firm but kind with Peter when he got scared. The weight of being the eldest daughter visible in every careful movement. Thomas was the wild one. 13, restless, always into something, testing boundaries, asking why when told to do things. Ethan set him to chopping wood, hauling water, any task that burned off energy. The boy complained constantly but did the work, reminded Ethan of himself at that age. All energy and no direction. Helen was the quiet one. 11, always watching, always thinking. She found Ethan's books on the second day and devoured them like water in the desert. Shakespeare, Whitman, the Bible, an old almanac. She didn't care. Words were words, and she was starving for them. He caught her reading by firelight long after the others were asleep, just sitting there in her nightgown, book held close to the dim light, completely lost in the story. You'll ruin your eyes, he told her. Don't care. She didn't look up from the page. Books are worth it. He couldn't argue with that logic. Peter stayed close to Catherine, 8 years old and still shaken from the blizzard. He flinched at loud noises, cried in his sleep, refused to go outside unless his mother was watching. Ethan recognized the signs. He'd seen soldiers like that after bad campaigns, after seeing friends die, broken in ways that didn't show on the outside. He'll come around, Catherine said one evening, watching Peter sleep fitfully. He just needs time. And if he doesn't, then I'll love him anyway. He doesn't have to be brave. He just has to be mine. Mary was Mary, a force of nature in a 6-year-old body. She asked questions, constantly followed Ethan everywhere when he was in the cabin, and had somehow decided that he was the most fascinating person she'd ever met. Every morning she'd appear at his side with a new question. Every evening she'd tell him about her day in exhaustive detail. Why do you live alone? Because I like quiet. But quiet is boring. Not to me. Did you have a little girl before? The question stopped him cold. He looked at Mary, her gap-toothed smile, her bright eyes, the dusting of freckles, and saw another face. Darker hair, lighter eyes. Anna, who would have been 8 this year if the fever hadn't taken her. Anna, who'd ask questions just like this. Anna, who'd followed him everywhere. Anna, who was gone. Yes, he said quietly, I did. What was her name? Anna. That's a pretty name. Mary considered this with the seriousness only children can muster. Where is she now? She's gone. She died. Oh. Mary's face fell. Real sadness there. I'm sorry, Uncle Ethan. It was a long time ago. Does it still hurt? He should lie, should tell her no. That time healed all wounds, that the pain faded, that you moved on, that life went on. All the things people say because the truth is too hard. But she was looking at him with those honest eyes, and he found he couldn't lie. Yeah, he said. It still hurts. Mary reached out and patted his hand with all the gravity of a wise old woman. That's okay. Mama says pain means you love something, and loving things is never wrong, even if it hurts later. He didn't trust his voice to respond. And Grace, little Grace, the baby who'd almost died in his arms. She was 3, all round cheeks and grabbing hands. She'd decided that Ethan was her favorite person in the cabin. She toddled after him constantly, reaching up to be held, babbling in a language only she understood. Strings of sounds that might have been words or might have been music. The first time she fell asleep in his arms, he sat frozen for an hour, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid to feel what he was feeling, this tiny weight against his chest, this absolute trust, this reminder of everything he'd lost. Catherine found him like that. Grace drooling on his shoulder, her little hand fisted in his shirt. You can put her down, she said softly. I know. You don't have to hold her. I know. But he didn't move. Couldn't. This feeling was too precious, too painful, too real. She looked at him, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. Understanding, recognition, compassion. You're good with them, she said, with all of them. I'm not good with anyone. Haven't been good with anyone in 7 years. Ethan, she moved closer, sat beside him. That's not true. You're patient with Mary's questions. You teach Daniel without making him feel stupid. You let Helen read your books. You give Thomas tasks that make him feel useful. You're gentle with Peter when he's scared. You hold Grace when she cries. Pause. You're good with them, whether you know it or not. Then maybe you're remembering. She touched his arm, just a brief contact, but it sent lightning through him. Maybe you're remembering what you used to be, before grief made you forget. He watched her carry Grace to the makeshift crib Alice had assembled from a wooden crate and some blankets. Watched her tuck the little girl in with such tenderness it hurt to see, smoothing hair from her forehead, pulling the blanket up, making sure she was warm. What was your daughter like? Catherine asked without turning around. Anna. His throat tightened. He stopped, started again. She was bright, always laughing, always asking questions like Mary does. She wanted to know everything about everything, how birds flew, where rain came from, why the stars were in the sky. How old was she? 3. She'd just turned 3 when the fever took her. Catherine turned to face him. Same age as Grace. Yeah. Is that why you let us stay? Because Grace reminded you of her? The question deserved an honest answer. He owed her that much. After everything she'd been through, after all she'd lost, she deserved honesty. Maybe at first, he said carefully, when I pulled her from the snow, when she whimpered in my arms, when I thought she was going to die. Pause. Yeah, maybe that was part of it. Maybe I was trying to save Anna all over again. Save her the way I couldn't save her the first time. But it's not why you're still here. Then why? He thought about it, really thought about it. What had kept him from sending them away once the storm passed? What had made him offer them shelter for the winter? What had broken through 7 years of carefully maintained isolation? Because you deserve better than what you got, he said finally. Because your children deserve a chance. Because I watched you crawl through snow, with frostbite and hypothermia still trying to reach your children. Because you refused to quit, even when quitting would have been easier. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. Because I'm tired, Catherine. I'm tired of being alone, tired of pretending that's enough, tired of slowly dying on this mountain. She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I'm scared, she said. Of what? Of this, of trusting it. Pause. Every time I've trusted something, it's been taken away. My parents died when I was 17. Cholera. Thomas died in that mine. Our home taken. Every job, every shelter, every small piece of security, gone. She wrapped her arms around herself. I keep waiting for you to change your mind, to look at me and see what everyone else sees. What does everyone else see? A burden. Too much woman, too many children, too many needs. Too much everything. Her voice broke. I'm tired too, Ethan. Tired of being unwanted. Tired of being told I'm too much for everyone. That my children are too much. That we're not worth the trouble. He crossed the room to her, slowly, giving her time to back away if she needed to. She didn't back away. You're not too much, he said. You're not a burden. And anyone who made you feel that way was a damn fool who didn't deserve you. She laughed, but there were tears in it. You barely know me. I know enough. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. She looked up at him. Firelight caught the tears on her cheeks, made them shine like gold, made her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with the world's stupid ideas about size and shape and what women should be. What happens when winter ends, she asked. When there's no blizzard keeping us here, when I have to figure out what comes next, when spring comes and you remember you like being alone. We figure it out together. Then why would you want to? Catherine. He said her name like it meant something, like a prayer or a promise or both. I spent 7 years on this mountain trying to die. Not fast, slow, day by day, year by year, convincing myself that alone was the same as safe, that not caring was the same as not hurting, that the only way to avoid pain was to avoid life. He took a breath. Then you showed up, you and your 7 children, you screaming into storms, you refusing to quit, you crawling through snow to reach your babies. And suddenly alone doesn't feel safe anymore. It feels empty. It feels like giving up. It feels like dying when I could be living. I didn't ask you to save me. I know, you were saving yourself. You've been saving yourself for 6 months. I just opened a door. You did all the hard work. She stared at him. Then slowly, carefully, like she was afraid he might disappear if she moved too fast, she reached out and took his hand. Her palm was rough, calloused, the hand of a woman who had worked every day of her life, the hand of a survivor. Okay, she said quietly. Okay. We figure it out together, whatever comes next. She squeezed his fingers. But I need you to understand something. Those children in there, they're everything to me. If I ever have to choose between them and anything else, anyone else, I choose them every time. No hesitation, no question. They come first. Always. I wouldn't expect anything less. Good. She released his hand. Now go check your traps. The children need to eat. And Mary told Thomas that you promised to teach her how to track rabbits. I didn't promise that. You did, apparently. Catherine was already moving toward the stove. She has very detailed memories of conversations that may or may not have happened. It's a gift. Ethan grabbed his coat, shaking his head. That child is going to be trouble. All my children are trouble. Catherine's voice was warm, proud even. That's how I know I raised them right. He paused at the door, looked back at her. This woman who had walked through fire and kept walking. This woman who had lost everything and still found strength to keep going. This woman who was slowly, carefully breaking down walls he'd spent 7 years building. Catherine. What? I'm glad you found my door. She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her, and it transformed her face, lit her up from the inside, made her beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with anything but the pure light of survival and hope. I'm glad you opened it. He stepped out into the cold. 300 miles south, Marshal Cole Stevens mounted his horse and headed north. In his pocket was a telegram with 2 words. Find her. He intended to do exactly that. 3 weeks passed on the mountain. 3 weeks of snowfall and firelight and the slow, careful dance of strangers becoming something more. 3 weeks of learning to share space, to share meals, to share life. On the porch of Blackwood Ridge, 50 years later, Thomas watched his grandfather's face change. The old man's eyes had gone distant, looking back through decades like a man reading a map of scars. You stopped, Thomas said quietly, right when it was getting good. Ethan blinked. Came back from 1906 to 1956. Smiled slightly. Getting good, boy. That was the easy part. The easy part was finding each other. The hard part was what came next. The hard part was keeping it. What came next? The old man shifted in his chair. The wood creaked under his weight. Outside, the Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of fire. 3 weeks. That's how long we had before the world came calling. 3 weeks to learn how to be a family. 3 weeks before I had to remember how to be a soldier again. Before I had to become the thing I'd been running from. Thomas leaned forward. Were you scared when you knew they were coming? Terrified. Ethan's voice was matter-of-fact. But not for myself. Then for what? For them, for Catherine, for those 7 children who'd already lost so much, who'd already been through hell. Pause. When you're young and you go to war, you think about dying. That's what young men do. They think about the bullet with their name on it. They think about being brave, about glory. But old men who fight, we know different. It's not dying that keeps you up at night, boy. It's failing the people who need you to stand. It's knowing that if you fall, everyone behind you falls too. That's what scared me. Not death, failure. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Did anyone teach you that, or did you just figure it out? Life taught me, the hard way. Ethan looked at his grandson. You'll learn it too in Korea. You'll learn that courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being scared to death and standing anyway because there are men to your left and right who need you to. Because falling isn't an option when others depend on you. How do I know I'll be brave enough? You won't. Not until the moment comes. No man knows what he's made of until he's tested. The old man's voice dropped. But I'll tell you what I learned that winter. You find out what you're made of when you've got something worth protecting. Before Catherine and those children, I had nothing. Nothing to fight for, nothing to live for, nothing to protect. That made me weak, not strong, empty, not safe. I thought you were a war hero, the cavalry scouts, the Indian Wars. I was a survivor. There's a difference. Ethan settled back in his chair. But that winter I became something else. I became a man with something to lose again. And that changes everything. Let me tell you about it. His eyes went distant again. Back to 1906. Back to the mountain. Back to when the world came calling. Montana Territory. Week 2. Ethan stood on the ridge above the cabin, watching the southern trail through a gap in the trees. The sky was the color of old iron. More snow coming. Always more snow. December in Montana meant months of its storms rolling in from the Pacific, burying the world. Daniel stood beside him, breath steaming in the cold air. The boy had grown quieter over the past week, more watchful. Less boy, more man. Learning to be still. Learning to wait. Learning that survival often meant patience more than action. See anything? Ethan asked. No, sir, but that doesn't mean nobody's there. Smart. The boy was learning to think like prey thinks. Always assume the hunter is close. Always assume you're being watched. They'd been checking the southern approach every morning for 5 days, ever since Ethan had found tracks 2 miles down. Horse tracks, 2 riders. Circling, probing, looking for something, looking for them. We need to talk about what happens, Ethan said, when they come. You mean if they come? No, I mean when. He turned to face Daniel. Men like the one who'll be coming, they don't give up. And the man he works for, Marcus Whitmore, he doesn't forgive debts, real or imagined. I've heard of him. Every man in Silver Creek has. He's built an empire on taking what he thinks he's owed. Daniel's jaw tightened. Mama doesn't owe him anything. Whatever papers he has, they're lies. I believe you, but belief doesn't stop bullets. And legal papers, even forged ones, carry weight. Ethan pointed back toward the cabin. You see that rise there, the one with the fallen pine? Yes, sir. That's where you'll be when they come. You'll have my spare rifle, the Henry repeater. 7 shots without reloading. Holds more rounds than the Springfield. You know how to use it. Pa taught me some. Basic shooting. Targets mostly. I'll teach you the rest. Combat shooting. Moving targets. Shooting under stress. Ethan moved along the ridge, pointing out positions, fields of fire angles of approach. See how the land slopes. Anyone coming up that trail, they'll be exposed for maybe 30 seconds. That's your window. You don't shoot first. You wait until I give the signal. But when you shoot, you make it count. Center mass, biggest target. Don't try for headshots. Don't try to be fancy. Just hit what you're aiming at. How do I know when to shoot? You'll know. Ethan looked at the boy, really looked. 17 years old. Should be worrying about girls and harvest dances and what to do with his life. Instead, he was learning how to kill, how to defend, how to become the thing he needed to be. Daniel, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. With me and with yourself. Yes, sir. Can you do this? Can you point a rifle at a man and pull the trigger? Can you end a life to protect your family? The boy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was steady. No hesitation. No doubt. If it's him or my family, yes, I can do it. It's not that simple. It's never that simple. You'll remember the man's face for the rest of your life. You'll see him in dreams. You'll wonder if he had a family, if you made someone else an orphan the way your mama was made a widow. Then I'll live with that. I'll live with whatever's not simple, but I won't live with losing them. I won't live with being too weak to protect them when they needed me. Ethan nodded slowly. This boy would do. This boy had what it took. Fair enough, let's get to work. They spent the next 3 hours drilling. How to judge distance in snow and changing light in the moment before shooting. How to lead a moving target, accounting for wind and drop and the fact that men don't stand still when they're being shot at. How to reload the Henry without looking down, keeping eyes on the target. How to breathe through the fear that would come when the shooting started, the adrenaline dump that made hands shake and vision narrow. Daniel was a natural. His hands were steady. His eyes were clear. Whatever doubts he had, he kept them buried deep where they couldn't interfere with the work. You'll do fine, Ethan said as they walked back toward the cabin. How do you know? Because you're not fighting for yourself. You're fighting for them. That makes all the difference. A man fighting for his own life might run. A man fighting for his family won't. Can't. Because running means losing everything. At the cabin, Catherine was teaching Alice how to make proper biscuits. The kind that were light and fluffy, not dense and heavy. Flour everywhere, dusting their aprons, their hands, their faces. The two of them laughing about something. For a moment, watching through the window, Ethan could almost forget the threat circling below. Almost. He pushed open the door. Warmth hit him like a wave, the smell of baking bread. Children's voices raised in play. Thomas and Peter building something with sticks. Helen reading to Mary. Grace toddling around babbling. Life, noise, family. Catherine looked up and smiled. That smile still caught him off guard every time. Made something in his chest twist tight. Made him remember what it felt like to want something, to need someone. Any luck with the traps, she asked. 2 rabbits. They're hanging outside. He stamped snow from his boots, hung his coat on the peg by the door. And tracks. 2 riders, maybe a mile south. Her smile faded. They're looking for us. They're looking for something. Whether they know it's you yet, I can't say. But they're coming soon. Alice stopped kneading dough. Mama, what do? We stay calm, Catherine said. But Ethan could see the fear in her eyes. The calculation. 7 children, 1 man to defend them, men with guns coming, math that didn't add up to survival. We trust Mr. Blackwood. Ethan, he corrected. Just Ethan, we're past formality. We trust Ethan. She met his eyes. Understanding passed between them. Fear, determination. Something deeper that neither had named yet, but both felt. That evening after the children were asleep, Catherine found Ethan outside. He was standing in the snow, under the stars, staring south toward Silver Creek, toward the town he hadn't visited in 7 years, toward the trouble that was coming. You should be sleeping, he said without turning around. So should you. Can't. Too much thinking. She came to stand beside him, close enough that he could feel her warmth through the cold, close enough that their breath mingled in white clouds. What are you thinking about? Plans, contingencies, how to keep 9 people alive if 12 men come up that hill with guns and Mongol papers in the conviction that they're in the right. Can you? He was quiet for a long moment. Honest. I don't know. In the cavalry, I kept men alive. But that was different. We had fortifications, supply lines, backup, other scouts. We could fall back or regroup, call for help. He turned to face her. Here it's just me. And Daniel, if I'm being honest about what's going to happen. A 41-year-old man with a bad leg and a 17-year-old boy against however many men Whitmore sends. No. Catherine's voice was sharp, sharp enough to cut. He's 17. He's a child. And he's the only other person here who can shoot. You know I'm right. You know we need every gun we can get. She did know. He could see it in her eyes. The terrible calculation every mother makes when there are no good choices left. When every option means risking the thing you love most. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that we can't just live, that there's always someone wanting to take something, that the world won't just leave us alone. I know. Do you really? She turned on him, sudden anger flaring like a match struck in darkness. You chose this mountain. You chose to be alone. You chose to run from the world. We didn't choose any of this. We just want to survive. We just want to exist. Is that too much to ask? No, it's not too much. It's the least the world owes you. The world doesn't owe us anything. The world has made that very clear. Over and over. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. He touched her face gentle, his rough fingers against her soft cheek, work-hardened hands on tired skin. Then I'll give you what the world won't. Safety, time, a chance, protection. You can't promise that. Watch me. She stared at him. Then quick as breathing, quick as hope, she leaned up and kissed him. It was brief, barely more than a brush of lips, but it hit him like lightning, like coming alive after being dead, like remembering what it meant to want something, someone to feel something other than the endless gray. Nothing he'd been living in. She pulled back, eyes wide, scared of what she'd done, scared of wanting. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have. Don't be sorry. But Catherine, he said her name like a prayer, like a vow. Don't be sorry, not for that, never for that. A small voice from inside, Mama, I had a bad dream. Peter's voice, small and scared. Catherine closed her eyes. Coming, baby. She looked back at Ethan. We'll talk later. Later, he agreed. She went inside. Ethan stood in the snow for another hour, touching his lips, feeling something he thought had died with Elizabeth. Hope, want, need. The dangerous, terrifying feeling of caring about someone again. 300 miles south, Marcus Whitmore sat in his office above the saloon and remembered his wife. The portrait on the wall showed her as she'd been at 25. Beautiful, young, alive. Sarah. Beautiful Sarah with her dark hair and quick laugh and endless patience for his ambitions. She'd believed in him when no one else did. Followed him from Virginia to Montana with nothing but hope and a 3-year-old boy on her hip. Robert, their son, their future. She'd made him better. Made him kind when his natural instinct was to be hard. Made him generous when his instinct was to hold tight to every penny. Made him believe that helping people was worth the risk. Winter of 1887. The cholera came like a thief in the night, crept into their house on invisible feet, took Sarah first. 3 days of fever and pain, and Whitmore sitting helpless beside her bed, watching her slip away, despite every prayer he knew, despite the doctor's best efforts, despite his wealth and his power and his desperate love. Her last words whispered with breath that rattled, promise me. Promise you'll help people who need it. Don't let our money make you hard. Don't let losing me make you cruel. He'd promised, held her hand until it went cold, then buried her in ground so frozen it took 3 days to dig deep enough. 3 days of men with picks and shovels breaking through ice and rock. 3 days of watching them dig the hole that would hold his whole heart. Robert lasted a week longer. 8 years old, calling for his mama. Not understanding why she didn't come. Not understanding why Papa couldn't make it better. Whitmore held him too, at the end, felt the little body go still, felt something inside himself break that would never heal right. He tried to keep his promise to Sarah, really tried. For the first few years, he'd been fair. Helped miners get started with reasonable loans, low interest, generous terms. Gave people second chances when they fell behind on payments. Built a reputation as a man you could trust. Then Jacob Sullivan borrowed $500, lost it gambling in 3 days, and skipped town in the night. Left his brother Thomas holding the debt. Whitmore had tried to be understanding, had given Thomas time to pay, had been patient. But Thomas died before the debt was settled. And his widow, that woman with her 7 children and her empty hands, she'd looked at Whitmore with those desperate eyes and said she had nothing. Nothing to give, nothing to pay with. And something in Whitmore had twisted, had turned, had broken the rest of the way. If he was generous, people took advantage. If he was kind, people saw weakness. If he helped, people ran. So he stopped being kind, started being hard. Started taking what he was owed, no excuses, no exceptions. Houses, land, labor, children if they were old enough to work. It wasn't slavery, it was justice. It was the natural order of things. It was people learning that debts had to be paid. And maybe somewhere Sarah would understand. This wasn't cruelty. This was teaching responsibility. This was maintaining order in a world that wanted to descend into chaos. He picked up his pen and wrote another telegram. Cole Stevens had been scouting for 3 weeks with no results. It was time to act decisively. Time to remind people that Marcus Whitmore didn't lose. Send 12 men, he wrote. Whatever it takes, bring her back. Back on the mountain, the days blurred together in a rhythm of survival and preparation. Training with Daniel, teaching Thomas and Helen where the emergency supplies were hidden. Even Peter got a job keeping watch from the loft window during daylight hours, his young eyes sharp for movement on the trails below. Mary took it as a game at first, hide and seek with higher stakes, playing sentinel. But even she grew quiet when Ethan sat them all down and explained that bad men were coming. Why are they bad? She asked. Because they want to take you away from your mama. That's very bad. Yes, it is, the worst kind of bad. Will you stop them, Uncle Ethan? He looked down at her, 6 years old, missing a tooth that had fallen out 2 days ago, leaving a gap in her smile, trusting him completely, believing he could do anything. Yes, he said, I'll stop them. Promise, promise, Watts. She hugged him and ran off to play. The weight of that promise sat heavy on his shoulders. A promise he might not be able to keep. A promise he'd die trying to keep. Catherine's hidden skill revealed itself slowly, then all at once, like sunrise. Alice found her one morning cleaning a pistol Ethan didn't know she had. The girl stopped in the doorway of the root cellar, eyes wide. Mama, where did you get that? Catherine looked up. No shame in her face. No apology. Just matter-of-fact competence. It was your grandfather's. He gave it to me when I turned 16. Said a woman alone in the world needed to know how to protect herself, especially in Kentucky after the war. Dangerous times. Can you use it? Yes. Simple. Certain, like saying the sky was blue. My father taught me to shoot when I was 8 years old. Targets first, then rabbits, then deer, squirrels, anything that moved. He said I had a steadier hand than most men he knew. Said I was a natural. Alice sat down slowly on the stairs, processing this. Does Mr. Ethan know? No, haven't seen a reason to tell him. Maybe now there's a reason. Catherine nodded, finished cleaning the pistol. Loaded it with practiced ease, fingers moving with muscle memory. Maybe there is. That evening, Ethan was showing Daniel how to estimate range when he heard it. A shot, sharp and clear, coming from behind the cabin. He grabbed his rifle and ran, Daniel right behind him. Rounded the corner to find Catherine standing in the snow, pistol raised, aimed at a target she'd hung from a tree branch. A crude circle drawn on bark. She fired again. The target jerked. Dead center, reloaded, smooth, fast, fired. Another hit. Ethan stopped, stared. Catherine lowered the pistol and looked at him. Met his eyes without flinching. My father's Colt .45. He gave it to me on my 16th birthday. Taught me when I was a girl. Said the world wasn't kind to women who couldn't defend themselves. Said a woman needed to be able to protect herself and her children. He was right. You can shoot. Yes, she met his eyes. I can shoot. How well? Better than most. Not as good as you probably, but good enough. Daniel looked between them, a slow smile spreading across his face. Mama, why didn't you tell us? Because you're children. You shouldn't have to think about guns and killing and violence. You should get to be children. Her voice cracked slightly. But we're past that now, aren't we? We've been past that for a long time. Ethan walked over to the target. 3 shots, 3 holes within an inch of each other. Center mass, group tight, lethal hits, every one. You're better than good enough, he said quietly. You're damn near perfect. My father taught me perfect wasn't good enough. He taught me not to miss. Ever. That night changed things. Catherine joined the training sessions, while Daniel learned the rifle she practiced with her pistol. Close range work, quick draws, multiple targets, shooting while moving, shooting from cover. She was good, better than good. She had the cold focus of someone who'd thought long and hard about what she was willing to do to protect her children. Someone who'd made her peace with violence, then someone who would do whatever it took. How does it feel? Ethan asked one evening after she'd put 6 shots through 6 targets without missing. Perfect accuracy, perfect control. Like I'm becoming someone I hoped I'd never have to be. Regret it? No. She reloaded mechanically, didn't look at him. I regret that it's necessary. I regret that the world made this necessary. But I don't regret being able to do it. I won't let them take my children. I won't be helpless again. Week 3 brought the first real scare. Thomas, the 13-year-old, was supposed to stay close to the cabin, check the wood pile, stack the split logs, come right back. Simple task, safe task. Instead, bored and restless and too young to fully understand real danger, he wandered to the southern trail. Just to see, just to look. A trapper was coming up the path. Old man, weathered face like carved wood, leading a mule packed with furs. Beaver, mink, fox. A good season. He saw Thomas and stopped. Morning, boy, where'd you come from? Thomas froze. Remembered Ethan's warnings too late. Way too late. I'm just checking. Just what? You living up here thought old Blackwood was alone. Been alone for 7 years. Everyone knows that. I'm visiting with my family, my uncle. Your uncle, huh? The trapper's eyes narrowed. Calculating. How many of you visiting? Just me and my brother. That's so? Because I heard tell down in Silver Creek there's a woman and bunch of kids being looked for. Marshals asking questions, offering money for information. Good money. Thomas felt his stomach drop, felt fear like ice water in his veins. I don't know anything about that. Course not. The trapper smiled. Wasn't a kind smile. Was the smile of a man who'd just found something valuable. Well, you tell your uncle the trapper Pete sends his regards. And maybe you tell him prices for information just went up. Supply and demand, boy. Economics. The man continued up the trail. Thomas ran back to the cabin legs, pumping hard, hammering. Burst through the door out of breath. Ethan listened to the story with a face like granite. When Thomas finished, breathless and scared and sorry, Ethan just nodded once. Sharp. Final. You did well telling me. Did wrong wandering off. I'm sorry, I didn't think. Sorry doesn't matter if you're dead. Sorry doesn't help when bad men use you to hurt your mother. His voice was hard, harder than Thomas had ever heard. Like stone, like iron. You're not a child playing games anymore. You're a soldier in a war you didn't start, but you're in now. Act like it. Thomas nodded, tears in his eyes. Catherine started to defend her son, but Ethan shook his head, cut her off with a look. No, he needs to hear this. They all do. Sugarcoating it will get them killed. He gathered the children, all 7, sat them down in a circle, made them look at him. Listen to me, all of you. Pay attention because your lives depend on this. He waited until he had every eye. The world wants to hurt you. There are men coming maybe today, maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, who want to take you away from your mother. They want to make you work like slaves until you're used up and broken, until you're too old or too sick to be useful, and then they'll throw you away. Mary's eyes went wide. Peter started to cry silently. I'm telling you this not to scare you. Well, maybe a little to scare you, because fear keeps you alive. I'm telling you because you need to know what we're facing. You need to know that I will do everything I can to keep you safe. But I can only do that if you follow the rules. Stay close, stay quiet. Do what your mother and I tell you. No wandering, no exceptions. Understand? 7 heads nodded. Good. Now go help your mother with dinner. They scattered like startled birds. Catherine came to stand beside him, touched his arm. That was harsh. That was necessary. Better they're scared and alive than comfortable and dead. She couldn't argue with that logic, didn't try. The romance grew in stolen moments. A touch of hands passing dishes, eyes meeting across the fire. Catherine's laugh at something Mary said warm and full, making Ethan's chest tight with feelings he'd thought were dead. The way she moved through the cabin, the way she held Grace, the way she defended her children, the way she smiled when she thought no one was looking. One night, 3 weeks in, she found him on the porch again, standing watch. Stars overhead like diamonds scattered on black velvet, his breath white in the cold. Montana winter in all its brutal beauty. You're always out here, she said. What are you looking for, Beau? Peace, quiet, things that used to be enough. And now they feel empty. She stood beside him. They didn't touch, didn't need to. The space between them hummed with things unsaid, with possibility, with danger, with hope. Tell me about Elizabeth, Catherine said quietly. If you want to, if it doesn't hurt too much. He was quiet for so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then she was a school teacher in a little town in Pennsylvania, Chester Springs. I was a farm boy who couldn't read worth a damn, 17 years old and barely knew my letters. She taught me. Spent hours after class, just the two of us, books spread between us. Patience of a saint. I fell in love with her before I even knew what the words meant. How old were you? 17. She was 19. Her father didn't approve, said I was rough and poor and had no prospects. He was right on all counts. But I loved her. And somehow, miracle of miracles, she loved me back. Saw something in me I didn't see in myself. We waited. I worked. Saved every penny. Learned to read properly. Got better. When I was 20, I asked her father for permission to marry her. He said no. So we ran away and did it anyway. Catherine smiled in the darkness. Scandalous. Her father didn't speak to her for 5 years. Cut her off completely. Not until Anna was born. Then he came around, met his granddaughter, said anyone who could make his daughter that happy couldn't be all bad. We made our peace. He died 2 years later. You made her happy. I tried every day, even during the cavalry years. I wrote her letters every chance I got. Told her about the men I fought beside the things I saw carefully edited, so she wouldn't know how bad it really was. How many friends I saw die. How close I came. She wrote back about the garden, about Anna learning to walk, and talk about the life waiting for me when I came home. You did come home. I did. Got out in 78, mustered out, and we had 7 good years. 7 years of peace and love and watching our daughter grow. 7 years of being a family. Then the fever came and took it all away. Took everything that mattered. He turned to look at Catherine. I thought I'd never feel that way again. Didn't want to. It hurt too much when I lost it. Hurt so much I wanted to would have if I'd had the courage. And now I'm terrified because I'm starting to feel it again. With you, with your children. This thing I swore I'd never let myself feel. This dangerous, terrifying thing called hope. Catherine reached out, took his hand. Her palm was rough and warm, strong. I'm terrified too, she whispered. Every man I've ever trusted has left me, dead or cruel or just gone. I swore I'd never trust anyone again, never need anyone again, never let myself want anything but survival. But you make me want to try. You look at my children like they're precious. You look at me like I'm not a burden, like I'm not too much. She stopped, started again, like I'm someone worth knowing, worth keeping. You are worth knowing, you're worth everything. She kissed him then, not quick this time, slow and deep and full of all the things they were both too scared to say out loud. All the fear and hope and desperate need mixed together. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Catherine laughed softly. a sound of wonder and fear mixed together. Mary's going to be impossible when she finds out. Finds out what? That her Uncle Ethan is going to be her papa. Ethan's heart stopped, started again, beating different. Is that what you want? I think it might be. She touched his face, traced the line of his jaw. If we survive what's coming, if the world gives us that chance, if we can fight hard enough to keep it, yes, that's what I want. Then that's what we'll have. I promise you, whatever it takes. They stood together in the starlight. Behind them, 7 children slept safe and warm. Ahead of them, 12 men rode north with guns and rope and legal papers and orders to bring back what Marcus Whitmore claimed was his. But for that one moment, none of it mattered. For that one moment, they had peace and possibility. Day 24 dawned cold and clear. Too clear. The kind of morning that felt like the world holding its breath. That felt like the calm before violence. That felt like the end of something and the beginning of something else. Ethan woke to Daniel shaking his shoulder, urgent. Someone's coming, 8 riders, maybe more, from the South Trail. No time for goodbyes, no time for speeches, no time for anything but action. Get your mother and the children into the root cellar. Now. I'm staying with you. Daniel, I'm staying. The boy's voice left no room for argument. Eyes hard, jaw set. You taught me to stand, so I'm standing. I'm not hiding while you fight for my family. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to send him down to safety, wanted to protect this boy the way he hadn't been able to protect his own daughter. But there was no time and he needed the help, and Daniel had earned the right to choose. East window, don't shoot unless you have to. Make every bullet count. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments, no heroics, just grab your family and go. Yes, sir. Catherine appeared, already herding children toward the cellar. Alice carrying Grace. Thomas helping Peter. Helen holding Mary's hand, moving fast, moving quiet. Practiced now after weeks of drills. Catherine's eyes met Ethan's across the chaos. Everything they'd never said passed between them in that look. Love, fear, promise. Goodbye, maybe. Keep them quiet, he said. No matter what you hear, stay down until I come for you. And if you don't come, I'll come, Catherine. I swear to God, I'll come. She nodded once, believed him, had to believe him, then disappeared into the cellar with her children. The bar slid into place with a sound like finality. Ethan turned to Daniel. The boy was checking his rifle, hands steady, face pale but determined. Ready. Ready. The riders entered the clearing. Not 8, 12. Cole Stevens at the front, marshal's badge catching the light. Hard men with harder faces flanking him. Guns on their hips, rifles in their saddle boots. The look of men who did violence for money and didn't lose sleep over it. And behind them, on a black horse that probably cost more than most men earned in a year, sat Marcus Whitmore himself. Ethan had never seen the man before, but he knew him instantly. The expensive coat tailored rich, the silver-handled pistol at his hip, more decoration than tool, the way he surveyed the cabin like he already owned it. Like everything he looked at was his by right. The face of a man who'd never been told no, never been denied, never lost. This was the enemy. This was the man who would take everything if Ethan failed. Stephen stopped at the edge of the clearing, called out, Hawthorne, you know why we're here. Last chance to do this easy. Send out the woman and children. Nobody has to get hurt. Ethan didn't answer. His rifle was trained on Stephen's chest. One shot, clean kill. That's all he'd need to start this. But starting meant no going back. Starting meant blood. Whitmore nudged his horse forward, confident, unconcerned. Mr. Blackwood, I'm told you've been harboring my property. I've come to reclaim what's mine. Ain't nobody's property on this mountain. The law disagrees. Whitmore's voice was smooth, cultured, the voice of education and money and power. Thomas Bennett owed me a considerable sum, $8,000 plus accumulated interest. When he died, that debt passed to his widow. She chose to run rather than honor her obligations. That's theft. The law is quite clear on this matter. Her obligations. You mean working her children like slaves for 15 years? I mean honest labor for honest debt. She knew what she was agreeing to. I have documents. Signed, witnessed, legal. She didn't agree to anything. Her husband did, and he's dead. Debt died with him. Dead men's debts don't disappear, Mr. Blackwood. They pass to their families. It's simple economics. Basic contract law. I'm surprised a man of your intelligence doesn't understand this. It's slavery dressed up in legal words. Whitmore smiled. Cold as winter, cold as death. Such a dramatic word. I prefer indentured service. It has a more civilized ring, more acceptable to polite society. You can call it whatever you want. You're still not getting them. I think I am. Whitmore gestured and his men began spreading out, circling the cabin like wolves around wounded prey. Professional, practiced. They'd done this before. You're one man, Mr. Blackwood. A crippled cavalry scout 20 years past his prime. I have 12, good men. Armed, trained, this ends one way. With the widow and her children in my custody, and you either dead or smart enough to walk away while you still can. I don't walk away. Then you die. Whitmore pulled his pistol, examined it casually like it was a pocket watch, like it was nothing. I'll give you 1 minute to reconsider. After that, my men will burn this cabin to the ground with everyone inside. Your choice, die for strangers or live to see another sunrise. Ethan felt the cold certainty settle over him. The same feeling he'd had in the cavalry, in the moments before a charge. When death became not a possibility, but a probability. When fear became a tool instead of a weakness. Daniel, he said quietly, when I give the signal, take out the man on the far left. Then get down, stay down. What's the signal? You'll know. 50 seconds. The men continued circling. Stevens had his hand on his gun. Whitmore looked bored. 40 seconds, 30 seconds. Last chance, Hawthorne. 20 seconds. Your funeral. 10 seconds. Ethan took a breath, steadied his aim, said a prayer he hadn't said in 7 years. Forgive me. Time's up. Whitmore raised his pistol, and Ethan shot him out of the saddle. The world exploded. The world exploded into violence. Gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Bullets tore through the cabin walls, splintering wood, shattering glass. The air filled with the crack of rifles, the boom of pistols, the screams of wounded horses. Ethan ducked as a round passed where his head had been a second before, so close he felt the wind of its passage. He rose, fired. A man screamed, dropped from his horse, clutching his chest. Reloaded. 15 seconds with the Springfield. Felt like an eternity. His hands moved by memory, by instinct, carved into muscle over 30 years of survival. Daniel's rifle cracked from the east window. Once, twice, another man down. The boy was shooting, true shooting, steady. Good. Stay down, Ethan shouted. He rose again. Fired. Another attacker fell spinning off his horse, hitting the snow and not moving. The cabin filled with smoke. Acrid. Choking. Gunpowder and burning wood. Someone had set a fire. Flames licked at the eaves on the south side, spreading fast in the dry timber. Daniel, the roof. The boy looked up, flames spreading across the shingles like living things. Hungry, fast, minutes before the whole structure caught. We have to get out. Not yet. Hold position. They'll rush us if we run. More gunfire. A bullet caught Ethan in the left arm. The pain was immediate, blinding, white hot, all-consuming, like being branded with hot iron. He dropped his rifle, grabbed his arm. Blood poured through his fingers, hot and slick. Ethan, Daniel's voice from somewhere far away. Can't shoot, can't reload, can't fight. The room spun, blood loss, shock. The old Sioux wound in his leg throbbed in sympathy. The door to the cellar flew open. Catherine appeared, climbing up, emerging from safety into hell. She wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be safe. She was supposed to survive. Get back down, he shouted through the pain. My children. Daniel's got them. I need you here. Now. She ran to him, pressed cloth torn from her petticoat to his wound. Her face was streaked with soot and tears and determination. I'm not leaving you. Catherine, I can't shoot. I can't. Then I will. She grabbed his Springfield, raised it to the shattered window. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were clear. She aimed like she'd been born to it. She fired. A man went down outside, clutching his throat. "My God," Ethan breathed. "Give me more bullets." He handed her the ammunition with his good hand. Watched stunned as she reloaded. Fast, efficient, no wasted motion. Raised the rifle again. Fired. Another man dropped from his horse dead before he hit the ground. "6 left," she said. Her voice was flat, cold, the voice of someone who'd made peace with violence. "Plus Whitmore if he's still alive. You've done this before. My daddy taught me to shoot when I was 8, taught me to kill when I was 10. First deer, then men who tried to hurt my mama during Reconstruction." She fired again, missed this time. The bullet sparked off a rock. Damn. The flames were spreading faster now. The whole east wall was engulfed. Smoke thick enough to choke on. Heat building. Minutes, maybe less, before the roof collapsed. "We have to go," Ethan said. Fighting through the pain. Fighting through the dizziness from blood loss. "Now, Sia. Not until they're gone. Catherine, the cabin's burning. We stay, we die. We leave, they shoot us in the back. Pick us off one by one." She was right, he could see it. Stephen's men had positioned themselves perfectly. Between the cabin and the tree line, any escape route was covered. "There's another way," Ethan said. "The cellar. There's a tunnel." "A what tunnel?" "Built it my first year here. Paranoid. Thought I might need an escape route someday." He managed a painful smile. "Guess I was right." "Why didn't you mention this before?" "Didn't think I'd need it. Didn't think anyone would find me. Didn't think I'd care enough about anything to run." She almost laughed. Despite everything, despite the flames and the blood and the men outside trying to kill them, she almost laughed. "Lead the way." "Daniel," Ethan called. "We're going down. Follow, now." They dropped through the cellar door just as the roof began to collapse. Timber and shingles and 41 years of accumulated snow crashing down. Heat and smoke followed them down into the darkness, but Ethan was already moving, pulling Catherine toward the back wall. Toward salvation he dug with his own hands years ago, when the loneliness had been so bad he'd needed a project, any project, to keep from putting his rifle in his mouth. He shoved aside a wooden panel that looked like nothing. A tunnel stretched into darkness. Narrow, rough-hewn, dirt walls held up by timber supports, barely wide enough for one person, 100 yards long, maybe more. He'd dug it over 2 months, moving earth one bucket at a time, shoring it up as he went. "Go," he said. "I'm right behind you." Catherine went. Ethan followed, dragging his wounded arm, fighting the dizziness that threatened to overwhelm him. The tunnel was longer than he remembered, the darkness complete except for the light at the far end. But he kept moving, one hand on the wall, following the sound of Catherine's breathing, following hope. Finally light. The tunnel opened into a rocky outcrop 100 yards from the cabin, hidden by trees and brush and the natural contours of the land. Perfect cover. Daniel was waiting with the 6 younger children, all alive, all safe, all terrified but breathing. "Mama!" They ran to her, 7 voices crying her name in relief and fear and love. Catherine gathered them, sobbing, counting, always counting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all here, all safe, miracle. "Is everyone?" she gasped. "We're okay, Mama. We're okay." Ethan leaned against a tree. His vision was swimming, blood loss catching up, the world tilting. He looked down at his arm, could see bone through torn flesh, white against red. Not good. "Ethan," Catherine was beside him again. Oh, God, I can see bone." "Just a scratch. You're bleeding to death." Been through worse. Had he? He couldn't remember. The Battle of Wolf Mountain, the Sioux ambush in '76. Everything was getting fuzzy. "No, you haven't." She turned to Daniel. "Pressure here, both hands. Now." The boy pressed his hands to the wound. Ethan bit back a scream. Tasted blood. His own, someone else's. Didn't matter. "We need to get him somewhere safe," Catherine said. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. Always steady when it mattered. "Somewhere I can clean this. Stop the bleeding properly. Or he dies." "North Pass," Ethan managed. Words were hard. Breathing was hard. "Trapper cabin, 3 miles north. Follow the ridge. Can't miss it. Can you walk 3 miles? Don't have a choice. They moved. 3 miles had never felt so long. 3 miles might as well have been 300. Ethan walked between Daniel and Alice, each supporting one of his arms. The wound screamed with every step, but he kept moving. Had to keep moving. Stop and die. Simple as that. Keep moving and maybe live. Catherine carried Grace, who'd fallen asleep despite everything. The blessing and curse of being 3 years old. Sleep through anything. Thomas had Mary on his back, the little girl clinging to his shoulders. Helen held Peter's palm hand, pulling him along when he stumbled. All of them exhausted, all of them scared, all of them alive. The trapper cabin appeared as the sun was setting, painting the snow red and gold. Barely standing, walls sagging, roof patched with pine boughs and hope. But shelter. Hidden. Far enough from Blackwood Ridge that Stephen's men wouldn't find them immediately. Catherine laid Ethan on the single cot, examined the wound. Her face went pale, paler than he'd ever seen. The bullet went through, that's good, but the bleeding won't stop and your skin is going gray. Shock. You're going into shock. I'll be fine. You'll be dead if I don't stop this. She turned to Daniel. Build a fire. Alice, find something metal. A knife. Anything. Mama, what are you? Go. Her voice cracked like a whip. Command voice, general voice, no argument allowed. Daniel built the fire, hands shaking but fast. Good boy. Strong boy. Alice found a hunting knife hanging on the wall. Rusted but serviceable. Old but sharp enough. Catherine heated the blade, held it in the flames until it glowed orange, hot enough to sear, hot enough to cauterize, hot enough to tame or kill. This is going to hurt, she told Ethan, her voice soft now, gentle. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I know. He looked at her, really looked. Memorized her face in case this was the last thing he saw. Just do it. She pressed the red-hot blade to his wound. Ethan screamed. He tried not to, tried to be strong for the children watching with terrified eyes. But the pain was beyond anything. Beyond the Sioux bullet in '76. Beyond anything in the cavalry campaigns. Beyond everything he'd ever felt. The smell of burning flesh, his flesh, the sound of sizzling, the feeling of meat cooking. His meat. Then it was over. The bleeding had stopped. He lay there gasping, sweat-soaked, trembling, but alive, still alive. You're going to live, Catherine said. Her voice shook, tears streaming down her face. You hear me? You're going to live. I won't let you die. I won't lose you. Not now, not when I just found you. Bossy woman, he managed. Damn right. She was already bandaging his arm with strips torn from her petticoat. Her hands were gentle now, careful, touching him like he was something precious, something worth saving. The children clustered around, Mary crying quietly, Peter holding Catherine's skirt, Grace still asleep, blissfully unaware, Thomas standing tall, trying to be strong, Helen watching everything with those sharp eyes, Alice holding Grace, Daniel standing guard by the door. You're going to be okay, Catherine told them all, her voice steady now, strong. Everyone's going to be okay. We're safe here. We're together. That's all that matters. But Ethan saw the doubt in her eyes. The fear. They'd escaped the cabin, escaped Stephen's men. But for how long and at what eye outside the wind picked up? Snow began to fall. And somewhere in the darkness, Marcus Whitmore clutched his wounded shoulder and planned his next move. Night fell over the trapper cabin like a shroud. Catherine stayed awake through the dark hours, watching Ethan's chest rise and fall, counting each breath like she counted her children. 1, 2, 3. Making sure life continued. Making sure death didn't take him while she wasn't looking. The children slept in a pile near the fire. Daniel sat watch by the door rifle across his knees. 17 years old and already carrying the weight of a man 3 times his age. Too young for this. Too young for any of this. Every hour, Catherine changed the bandage on Ethan's arm, checked for fresh bleeding, for signs of infection, for the fever that could still take him even though the bullet was gone and the wound was cauterized. She'd saved him from bleeding out, but infection could kill him just as dead. Near dawn, his eyes opened, clear, focused, the gray pallor gone from his skin. "You stayed up all night," he said. His voice was rough but steady. "Someone had to. You should have slept." "I couldn't." She touched his face, felt the warmth of living skin, not the cold she'd been afraid of finding. "Every time I closed my eyes, I saw you dying. Saw myself alone again with 7 children and nowhere to go. Saw everything we'd built turning to ash. I'm not dying. You can't know that. I can." He reached for her hand with his good arm, squeezed, weak but real. "Because I'm too stubborn to die. And because I have something to live for now, and one to live for." "What do you have to live for?" He looked at her, really looked, like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, the only thing that had ever mattered. "You, your children, this." He gestured weakly at the cabin, at the sleeping forms of 7 children. "I spent 7 years dying slowly on that mountain, convincing myself that alone was the same as safe, that not caring was the same as not hurting, that the only way to survive was to not feel anything." He pulled her closer. "Then you knocked on my door. You and your 7 impossible children. You screaming into storms. You refusing to quit. And suddenly alone didn't feel safe anymore. It felt empty. It felt like giving up. It felt like dying when I could be living. Ethan, I love you, Catherine." The words came out rough, unpracticed, but they came out true, real. "I know it's too fast. I know we barely know each other. I know there's a madman out there who wants to drag your children into slavery. But I love you. I love your strength and your stubbornness and the way you look at those kids like they're the only thing in the world that matters." She was crying now, but she was smiling too. "You're delirious. Blood loss makes people say things. Maybe doesn't make it less true. You love me. I do. Even though I'm—" She stopped, started again. "Even though everyone says I'm too much, too big, too many children, too many needs, too much trouble." "Don't." His voice hardened despite the weakness. "Don't say whatever you're about to say. Don't talk about being too much or too big or too anything. You're exactly right, exactly who you're supposed to be. And anyone who can't see that is blind." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she laughed, broken and beautiful. "You're the strangest man I've ever met, the strangest and the best. That a yes to what? To whatever comes next, to facing Whitmore together, to building something worth fighting for. To us." She leaned down, kissed him, not his forehead this time, his lips, soft and warm and tasting like tears and hope, and something that felt dangerously like forever. "Yes," she whispered against his mouth. "To all of it, yes." Mary's voice cut through the moment. "Mama, are you kissing Mr. Ethan?" Catherine pulled back, face flushing. "Go back to sleep, baby." "But you were kissing him." "Mary, does this mean Mr. Ethan's going to be our papa, like a real papa, not like Uncle Jacob, who was mean?" Ethan and Catherine looked at each other. 1,000 words passed between them in that look. Fear, hope, promise, forever. "Would that be okay?" Ethan asked the little girl, his throat tight with emotion he couldn't name. Mary considered this very seriously, her 6-year-old face grave. "Can you teach me to shoot like Mama when I'm older?" His throat tightened. 7 years since anyone had called him Papa. 7 years since he'd wanted to hear it. 7 years of running from that word, from that responsibility, from that love. "Yeah," he managed. "You can call me Papa, if you want to." Mary beamed, then she turned to her siblings who were waking now. "Did you hear that we're getting a Papa? A real one who doesn't yell, and who saved us, and who makes Mama smile." Thomas groaned, trying to look too cool for sentiment. "Mary, it's too early." "But we're getting a Papa." One by one the children gathered around, looking at Ethan with wide eyes, looking at their mother for confirmation. Afraid to hope, afraid to believe. Catherine smiled, the first real smile since the shooting started. "I say it's okay, if you all say it's okay." The children erupted. Mary tackled Ethan on the cot, nearly reopening his wound. Grace woke crying and was immediately comforted by Alice. Peter crept closer, still uncertain. until Ethan reached out and pulled him into a one-armed hug. Helen smiled, quiet but genuine. Thomas was grinning despite trying not to. Alice was crying happy tears. Even Daniel, trying to look tough, was smiling. When Ethan met his eyes, the boy nodded once. Respect, acceptance, welcome. "We still have a problem," Daniel said quietly, bringing reality back. "Whitmore's still out there." The room went quiet. The celebration died. Everyone remembered the men with guns, the burning cabin, the threat that hadn't gone away just because they'd escaped. "I know," Ethan said, fighting to sit up. Catherine helped him, her hands steady on his back. "We can't hide forever, and we can't run forever, not with 7 children and a wounded man." "So what do we do?" Ethan looked at his new family. 7 children and 1 extraordinary woman. All of them watching him, trusting him, believing he could fix this, believing he could save them. "We stay smart, we stay hidden, and we wait for him to make a mistake. Because he will. Pride always makes men stupid." On the porch of Blackwood Ridge, 50 years later, Thomas watched his grandfather pause in the story. The old man's face had gone distant again. Not with memory this time. With something else. Something harder. Something that still hurt after all these years. "You stopped again," Thomas said. "Because this is the part that's hard to tell." Ethan looked at his grandson. What came next, it wasn't heroic. It wasn't clean. It wasn't the way stories are supposed to end. War never is. What happened? Marcus Whitmore happened, and the choice I had to make about what kind of man I wanted to be, about revenge and justice and the difference between them. Thomas leaned forward. "What choice?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The choice between killing a man because you hate him or letting him die because he brought it on himself. The choice between being a murderer or being a witness. Between taking life and letting life go." "I don't understand." "You will. Let me finish the story." The old man's voice dropped. 300 miles south, Marcus Whitmore sat in a chair while Dr. Cooper worked on his shoulder. The bullet Ethan had fired had gone through clean. That was the good news. The bad news was that the wound was already showing signs of infection. Red streaks spreading from the entry point. Heat, swelling, fever starting to build. 300 miles south in Silver Creek, Marcus Whitmore sat in his office and felt death coming. "You need to rest," Dr. Cooper said, packing the wound with clean cloth soaked in carbolic acid. "Let this heal properly. Stay in bed, no exertion, or you'll die." "After." "After what?" "After I get what's mine." Whitmore's voice was weak but determined, fevered but focused. Cooper shook his head. "Marcus, you've lost 9 men. Good men. You were shot. The woman and her children are gone. Let it go. For God's sake, let it go before it kills you." "No." "Why?" Cooper stood, gathering his instruments. "It's not about the money. You've got more money than any 10 men. So why? Why are you doing this?" Whitmore looked at the portrait on his wall. Sarah and Robert, frozen in time. Forever young, forever his, forever dead. "Because I promised her," he said quietly. "My Sarah. On her deathbed. I promised I'd help people who needed it. I gave Thomas Bennett a loan when no one else would. I helped him start his life. And he died owing me. Died without paying what he owed. Thomas didn't die owing you $8,000. He died owing you $200. Everyone knows you forged the rest of those documents." Whitmore's eyes went hard despite the fever. "Prove it." "I don't have to prove it. I'm your doctor, not your lawyer. I'm just telling you what everyone in town knows. You've been doing this for years, forging debts, stealing land, destroying families, taking children." Cooper's voice was gentle but firm. "Sarah wouldn't want this. You know she wouldn't. The woman I knew, the woman you loved, she'd be ashamed." "Don't you dare speak her name." Whitmore tried to stand. Pain lanced through his shoulder. Fever made the room spin, but he stood anyway. "Get out." "Marcus, I said get out." Cooper left, closed the door quietly, left Whitmore alone with his portrait and his fever and his obsession. The room tilted. Whitmore sat down hard, pressed his hand to his wound. Hot. Too hot. Infection spreading. He could feel it. Could feel death creeping through his veins. But he couldn't stop, couldn't quit. Had to finish this. Had to prove that debts got paid. Had to show that Marcus Whitmore didn't lose. Had to keep his promise to Sarah even if keeping it killed him. He called for Cole Stevens. The marshal came in bandaged and limping from a bullet graze. "Find them," Whitmore said. "I don't care how long it takes. I don't care what it costs. Find them and bring them back. All of them. The woman, the children, the hermit who shot me. Sir, you need to recover the wound. The wound is nothing. My pride is everything." He picked up a pen with shaking hands, started writing. "Take 4 men, the best we have left. Track them. They can't have gone far. Not with 7 children and a wounded man. They'll leave signs, blood, footprints. They'll make mistake. And when we find them," Whitmore looked up, fever bright in his eyes. "Fever or madness or both. Do whatever it takes. Burn them out if you have to, but bring her back. Bring the children back. They're mine, they owe me, and I collect what's owed." Stevens nodded, took the orders, left to gather men. Whitmore sat alone in his office, shivering despite the fire, burning despite the cold. The infection spreading. Time running out, but still determined. Still obsessed. Still convinced he was right. 2 days passed in the trapper cabin. Ethan's fever came and went. Catherine tended him with the fierce determination of someone who'd already lost too much. Changed bandages, forced water past his lips, held him when he shook with chills, cooled him with snow when fever burned. The children settled into new routines. Daniel hunted, bringing back rabbits and squirrels. Alice cooked what little they had. Thomas and Helen kept watch from the windows. Peter, Mary, and Grace tried to stay quiet and out of the way. All of them scared, all of them tired, all of them alive. On the 3rd morning, Daniel came back from scouting with his face pale. "They're coming. 4 riders, maybe a mile south. Stevens and 3 others. Ethan tried to stand, made it halfway before dizziness forced him back down. The room spun. His arms screamed. "How many?" Catherine asked, her voice steady, already calculating. 4. Stevens and 3 others. Well armed. "We can fight 4, Ethan said. Had to believe it. 4 against 2. Better odds than before. "Not like this, you can't." Catherine touched his forehead, still burning. Fever hadn't broken. "You can barely stand. You can't shoot. You're in no condition to fight. Then we run. Where you said yourself 3 miles to anything, and you can't walk 300 yards in your condition." She was right. They were trapped. 4 armed men coming. Ethan too weak to fight. The children too young to defend themselves. Math that didn't add up to survival. Daniel checked his rifle. "I can hold them off. Give you time to get the others out on the back. Head north. I'll catch up." "No," Catherine said, her voice sharp. Final. "Absolutely not. Mama, there's no other way." "There's always another way." But her voice shook. She didn't know what that way was, didn't have an answer, just refused to accept the math. The sound of horses grew closer, hoofbeats in snow, men calling to each other, getting closer, coming for them. Then gunfire, but not aimed at the cabin, aimed somewhere else. South, back the way Stevens had come. Daniel ran to the window. "I see other men coming from the north. They're shooting at Stevens." "What?" Ethan forced himself up, staggered to the window. 8 riders, maybe more, coming down from the high country. One wore a tin star that caught the light. Sheriff Hayes. The lawman fired again. Stevens's horse reared. The marshal and his men wheeled around, caught between the cabin and the new arrivals. Trapped the way they'd planned to trap Ethan. "That's enough, Stevens." Hayes's voice carried clear across the snow. "You're done. It's over." "This is none of your business, the sheriff." "I'm making it my business. Whitmore sent you after a woman and children based on forged documents. That makes it my business. That makes it the law's business." Ethan watched stunned as the townsmen from Silver Creek surrounded Stevens and his men. Watched them disarm them. Watched justice arrive from an unexpected direction. Watched the world turn right side up again. Catherine's hand found his. "Is it over?" "I don't know." Hayes rode up to the cabin, dismounted, took off his hat in respect. "Blackwood, Mrs. Bennett, you can come out. It's safe now, I give you my word." They emerged slowly, Catherine first, then the children one by one, Then Ethan leaning heavily on Daniel. The winter sun was bright on fresh snow, almost blinding. Hayes looked at them, at the wounded man, at the exhausted woman, at 7 children who'd been through hell, at a family that had fought to survive. "Ma'am," he said, "I apologize for what Whitmore's put you through, for what this town let him get away with, for not stopping this sooner." "Why now?" Catherine asked. "Why help us now? Why not a month ago, a year ago?" "Because we found the documents, the real ones. Thomas Bennett's original loan agreement. $400, paid down to $200 before he died in that mine." Hayes looked at the ground, ashamed. "And we found 11 other families with the same story. Forged debts, stolen land, children taken. Whitmore's been doing this for years. We all knew. We all looked the other way because he was rich and powerful and we were scared. But no more." "Where is he?" Ethan asked, his voice rough, weak but hard underneath. "Back in Silver Creek. Dying according to Doc Cooper. The wound you gave him got infected. He's got fever, delirium, maybe days, maybe hours. The infection's spreading too fast." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Not satisfaction, not quite. Just a cold certainty that justice, when it came, often looked nothing like what you expected. Often looked like a man dying alone of his own mistakes. "What happens to us?" Catherine asked. The question that mattered. The only question. "You're free." The debt was a lie. The warrant was a lie. The documents were forgeries. Everything Whitmore claimed was built on fraud. Hayes put his hat back on. "Town council met last night. They voted unanimously. You're free, ma'am. All of you. No one's coming for you, not anymore." Catherine's knees buckled. Daniel caught her. She sobbed once hard, like something breaking inside her. A sound of relief so profound it hurt to hear. "We're free." "Yes, ma'am. No one's coming for you, not anymore. It's over." The children gathered around their mother, Mary crying, Alice holding Grace, Thomas standing tall like he'd suddenly remembered how to hope, Peter clutching Catherine's skirt, Helen smiling through tears, Daniel supporting them all, and Ethan standing apart watching this family he'd found, this family that had found him, this family that had saved him as much as he'd saved them. "Free now, safe now, together now. You can come back to town," Hayes said, "or not. Your choice, but you're welcome. More than welcome. A lot of folks feel ashamed they didn't stand up to Whitmore sooner. They want to make it right." "We'll come," Catherine said, looking at Ethan, "if that's okay with you." He nodded. "We'll come." They rode into Silver Creek 3 days later. The town had changed. Or maybe Ethan had changed and was finally seeing it clearly. Seeing the shame, seeing the hope, seeing people who wanted to do better. People came out to watch them pass, but not with hostility, not with judgment, with something else. Shame, maybe. Hope. The sense that something broken might finally be healing. Mr. Jensen came out of his general store. "Mrs. Bennett, the rooms above my place are empty. You and yours can stay there as long as you need. No charge." "I can't pay. Don't want payment. Want to make things right. That's all. Just want to help." They settled in. Catherine in one room with the younger girls, Ethan in another with the boys. Proper. Respectable. Even though everyone in town knew where things were heading. Even though everyone could see the way they looked at each other. That evening, Sheriff Hayes came by with news. Whitmore died this afternoon. Ethan and Catherine were sitting on the porch of the boarding house. The children inside finally able to be loud and carefree. Finally able to play without fear. "How?" Ethan asked. "Infection, fever, blood poisoning from the wound." Hayes sat down on the steps, heavy, tired. Doc Cooper said he was calling for his wife and son at the end. People who died 20 years ago, calling for Sarah, for Robert, like he was a boy again, like none of it had happened. "He wasn't always like this, you know," Hayes continued. "Before his family died, he was a good man, fair, generous, helped people start businesses, gave to the church, was kind to children. Then cholera took his wife and son in '87, and something in him broke, twisted. He convinced himself that being hard was the same as keeping his promise to his dead wife, that destroying people who didn't pay was the same as helping people." Catherine was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I should hate him for what he put us through, for hunting us like animals, for trying to take my children. But, but I just feel sad for him, for his wife and son who died, for the man he might have been if things had gone different, for the waste of it all. Ethan took her hand. This woman who'd walked through hell and came out able to feel compassion for the man who'd hunted her. This woman who refused to let the world make her hard. This woman he loved. The town wants to help rebuild your cabin, Hayes said. If you're going back to the mountain. The vote was unanimous. Materials, labor, whatever you need. We are, Ethan said, looking at Catherine, seeing agreement in her eyes. If that's what you want, it's what I want. A home, a real home for all of us. No more running, no more hiding, just living. 3 days later, they were married in the Silver Creek church. It wasn't fancy. Catherine wore her best dress, cleaned and mended, but still showing its age. Ethan wore a suit borrowed from the general store owner. Too tight in the shoulders where cavalry training had built muscle. Too short in the sleeves. None of it fit quite right. None of it mattered. The children stood in a row at the front. Daniel serious and proud, standing like a man now. Alice crying quietly, happy tears. Thomas trying to look bored and failing completely. Helen clutching a book someone had given her as a gift, a present from the town. Peter holding Catherine's hand even though she was supposed to be at the altar. Mary bouncing with excitement that couldn't be contained. Grace asleep in Alice's arms, blissfully unaware of history being made. Sheriff Hayes stood as witness. Dr. Cooper sat in the front pew, the man who'd tried to save Whitmore, the man who'd failed but tried. And behind them, filling every seat, spilling out the doors, standing in the aisles were the people of Silver Creek, coming to make amends in the only way they knew how, coming to witness, coming to celebrate. The preacher cleared his throat. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Ethan barely heard the words. He was looking at Catherine, at the tears on her cheeks, the smile on her lips. The way she looked at him like he was everything, like he was enough, like he was exactly what she needed. Do you, Ethan Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health till death do you part? I do. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. And do you, Catherine Rose Bennett, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health till death do you part? I do. Her voice strong, clear, sure. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, and by God Almighty, I now pronounce you man and wife. The preacher smiled. You may kiss the bride, and may God bless this union. He did, properly this time, thoroughly, with all the love and hope and desperate gratitude he felt. The church erupted in applause. Cheers, celebration. Mary's voice rose above it all, clear as a bell. We have a papa. We have a real papa who loves us. Building the new cabin took most of the spring. The whole town helped. Men came up the mountain with lumber and tools and sweat and penance, working alongside Ethan and Daniel from dawn to dusk, building something that would last, building something that mattered. Women brought food, kept the children entertained and educated, taught Catherine recipes she'd never tried, welcomed her into the community she'd been running from. The cabin grew larger than the original. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a proper kitchen that made Catherine's eyes light up when she saw it, windows that let in light, a porch that wrapped around 3 sides, strong, solid, built to last generations. This is too much, she said, watching the roof go up. It's not enough. Ethan ran his hand along the new wood, smooth, strong, real. You deserve a palace. This is just a cabin. I don't need a palace. I just need walls that don't leak and a roof that doesn't burn and enough space for 8 people to live without killing each other. You've got that, and you've got everything else too. The children claimed their rooms with the territorial ferocity that only siblings could muster. Mary and Grace in one room immediately starting to argue about who got which bed. Helen and Alice in another already organizing books and making plans. The 3 boys sharing the largest room, which immediately devolved into good-natured chaos. Daniel hung back, 17 years old, almost 18. I was thinking. About what? Ethan asked. I'm old enough now, old enough to make my own way, find my own path. Maybe it's time. Time for what? Time for me to leave, find work, start my own life. I've been taking care of everyone else for so long. Maybe it's time to take care of myself. Ethan was quiet for a moment. He'd known this was coming, had seen it building for weeks. Daniel had carried his family for too long, had been the man of the house since he was 15. He deserved a chance to find out who he was when he wasn't responsible for everyone else's survival. If you go, Ethan said carefully, you go with my blessing. You've earned it. You've earned that and more. But, but you've also got a home here, forever. Doesn't matter if you're 18 or 80. This is your place. These are your people. You can leave and come back as many times as you need. The door's always open. Daniel swallowed hard. I don't know how to be someone's son anymore. I've been the one taking care of everyone for so long. I don't know how to just be Daniel, just be a kid. Then don't be a kid. Be a man. Figure out who that man is, what he wants, what he needs. Ethan put his hand on the boy's shoulder. That's what family is. People who stick around while you figure things out. People who let you leave and welcome you back. People who love you even when you don't know who you are yet. The young man nodded slowly. I think I'll stay. For now, there's still work to do here. The cabin needs finishing, the land needs clearing, and Mama needs help with the little ones. Good, I could use the help. Your mother wants chickens, and apparently Mary has been promised a horse that I don't remember promising. You definitely promised her a horse. She has witnesses, multiple witnesses, very detailed testimony. Daniel groaned. That girl is going to be the death of us all. Probably, but at least we'll die entertained. Summer came warm and golden. The garden flourished under Catherine's care. Tomatoes, beans, squash, peas, lettuce, carrots, herbs that filled the kitchen with fragrance. She taught Alice everything she knew. And Alice taught Helen, and Helen tried to teach Mary, though Mary was more interested in the horse that had appeared one morning, a gentle mare that Ethan had definitely promised even if he didn't remember it. The chickens Ruth had begged for scratched in their coop, providing eggs that Catherine transformed into dishes that made the whole family groan with pleasure. Omelets, custards, cakes, breads, magic from simple ingredients. Ethan watched it all with a kind of bewildered gratitude. A year ago, he'd been alone on this mountain. He's slowly dying of loneliness he refused to name, convinced that alone was the same as safe, that isolation was the same as peace. Now he had a wife who made him laugh, 7 children who called him Papa, a home that rang with noise and chaos in life, everything he'd run from, everything he'd thought he didn't want, everything he'd needed without knowing it. One evening, Catherine found him on the porch, watching the sunset. Same view he'd watched for 7 years, but different now. Everything was different. What are you thinking about? She asked. Everything. Nothing. He pulled her down beside him. How different things are. Good different. The best different. She leaned against his shoulder, comfortable, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. I still can't believe it sometimes, that this is real, that we're safe, that we're actually here. We're here, we're safe, it's real. That we're happy yourself. I said, are you? He turned to look at her, needed to hear it, needed to know. Really happy. She was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but certain, sure in a way that couldn't be faked. I spent 34 years being told I was too much, too big, too loud, too many children, too many needs, too much trouble for anyone to want. She took his face in her hands, rough palms against his weathered cheeks. I spent 2 years running, hiding, begging for scraps of kindness from people who looked at me like I was nothing, like I was a burden they couldn't wait to put down. And then I found you, a man who looked at me and saw something worth saving, worth fighting for, worth loving. Her voice broke. So yes, Ethan Blackwood, I'm happy, happier than I ever thought I could be, happier than I knew was possible. He kissed her, slow and sweet, with all the time in the world, with all the promise of forever. Ooh, Mary's voice from the doorway. They're kissing again. They're always kissing. Mary Rose Blackwood, get back inside this instant. But I wanted to show Papa the frog I found. It's a really good frog. The frog can wait, but it's a very good frog, the best frog I've ever found. Catherine sighed. This is our life now. I know, Ethan grinned. I love it, every chaotic, noisy, exhausting minute of it. Years passed. The cabin became a home, then a landmark, then a legend in the territory. Travelers passing through Montana knew to stop at Blackwood Ridge for the best food in 100 miles and the warmest welcome they'd ever receive. Catherine's reputation as a cook spread far and wide, drawing people from as far as Helena and Butte. She taught Alice everything she knew, and Alice taught Helen. And Helen tried to teach Mary, though Mary was more interested in horses than biscuits, and everyone had learned to accept that. The girl could ride like she'd been born in a saddle, could track game almost as well as Ethan, and had no interest whatsoever in cooking or sewing or any of the things young ladies were supposed to do. Daniel stayed, built his own cabin half a mile down the ridge when he turned 20. Married a school teacher from Silver Creek named Hannah, who loved books as much as Helen did. They gave Ethan and Catherine their first grandchild, a boy named Thomas after Catherine's first husband. You didn't have to do that, Catherine said when she heard the name, tears in her eyes. I wanted to. Daniel held his son with the careful wonder of new fathers everywhere. He wasn't perfect, but he was my father, and he gave me life, gave me all of you. That's worth remembering, worth honoring. Thomas grew into a rancher, traded his restless energy for a spread of his own in the valley below when he turned 22. Raised cattle and 4 children, with equal enthusiasm driving his poor wife Emily crazy with schemes that somehow always worked out. He had his mother's stubbornness and his father's work ethic, a combination that made him successful beyond anyone's expectations. Alice married Dr. Cooper's nephew James when she was 20, a gentle man who adored her cooking and never once made her feel like she should be anything other than exactly who she was. They took over the boarding house in Silver Creek, turning it into the finest establishment in the county. Clean, comfortable, known for the best meals and the kindest hospitality. Helen became a teacher first, then a writer, then a woman who traveled the world and sent letters home filled with stories that made Mary jealous and Peter proud. She never married, declared she had no interest in being tied down, and spent 40 years documenting the American West for magazines and newspapers. Her book, Voices of the Territory, became required reading in schools across Montana. Peter grew slowly, carefully, the scars of his childhood fading but never quite disappearing. He became a minister at 25, a quiet calling that surprised no one who really knew him. He built a church on the edge of Silver Creek and filled it with people who needed gentleness in a hard world. His sermons were soft-spoken but powerful, drawing from personal experience with fear and trauma and healing. Mary became exactly who everyone expected her to be: wild, free, unstoppable. She married a horse trader named James at 19, divorced him a year later when he tried to tell her what to do, and spent the rest of her life running a horse ranch that rivaled at any man's in the territory. She raised quarter horses known throughout Montana for their speed and temperament, never remarried, and died at 82, still breaking colts. And Grace, the baby who'd almost died in Ethan's arms. She grew into a beauty with her mother's fierce eyes and her father's stubborn jaw. She married a young lawman named David Hayes at 21, Sheriff Hayes's grandson, and raised 4 children of her own on the ridge where she'd learned to walk. She became known throughout the county as someone you didn't cross, someone who fought for justice, someone who carried her mother's strength and her father's determination. Through it all, Ethan and Catherine remained. They grew old together on that mountain, watching their children flourish, watching grandchildren arrive, then great-grandchildren, watching the world change around them while their love stayed constant. Through Montana statehood in 1889, through the Spanish-American War, through the turn of the century, through World War I, through everything together. On the porch at Blackwood Ridge, the present day 1956, Thomas watched his grandfather finish the story. The old man's voice had gone soft, his eyes bright with memory and love and loss. So that's it? Thomas asked. They just lived happily ever after. Nobody lives happily ever after. That's fairy tale nonsense. Life doesn't work that way. Ethan shifted in his chair, His leg ached, the Sioux bullet still there after 80 years. But we lived. We loved. We built something worth having. That's better than any fairy tale. Did you ever regret it, taking them in that day? Every day. Thomas blinked. What? I regretted it every day. Ethan smiled, gentle and sad. Because every day I woke up and wondered what I'd done to deserve it. Wondered when it would all be taken away. Wondered if I was good enough for them. If I could keep them safe. If I could be the man they needed me to be. Were you, Tom? No, but I tried to be. That's all any man can do. Try, fail, try again. Keep trying until you get it right or die trying. Inside the house, voices rose. Laughter. The sound of too many people in too small a space. Catherine's voice cutting through organizing chaos like she'd done for 50 years. Commanding, loving. Still strong at 84. She's calling us for dinner, Ethan said. You ready? Wait. Thomas put a hand on his grandfather's arm. I need to ask, when I go to Korea, when I'm scared, what do I do? Ethan looked at his grandson, 20 years old, about to go to war, about to learn what fear really meant, about to be tested in ways no young man should be tested. You stand, he said simply, not because you're not afraid, but because there are men beside you who need you to. You stand because standing is what men do when everything says run. What if I'm not strong enough? You won't know until the moment comes. No man knows what he's made of until he's tested, until everything's on the line. Ethan leaned forward. But I'll tell you this, courage isn't about being unafraid. It's about being scared to death and doing what needs doing anyway. It's about finding something bigger than yourself to fight for. Like what? Like the men to your left and right, like the people back home waiting for you, like the promise you made to come back. Pause. Like I fought for Catherine and those 7 children. Not because I wasn't afraid, I was terrified, but because losing them was worse than anything the world could do to me. Fear of losing them was bigger than fear of dying. Thomas nodded slowly, understanding dawning. I'll remember, Grandpa. Good. Now come on. Your grandmother will have both our heads if we let dinner get cold. And at 91, I'm too old to fight that woman. They stood, Ethan's slower bones creaking but still standing, still strong, still here. Inside, the family was gathered, Catherine at the head of the table, white hair pulled back, gnarled hands from a lifetime of work, eyes still as sharp as the day she'd knocked on a stranger's door and begged to be let in. All 7 children were there, now grown, now gray themselves. Daniel at 67, still strong, still steady. Alice at 65, still cooking, still caring. Thomas at 63, still ranching, still scheming. Helen at 61, still writing, still traveling. Peter at 58, still preaching, still healing. Mary at 56, still wild, still free. Grace at 53, still fierce, still fighting. And their children. And their children's children. 40 people crammed into the house, spilling onto the porch, spreading across the meadow in a sea of noise and laughter and life. 4 generations, all existing because one woman had screamed into a blizzard and one man had answered. Catherine saw Ethan in the doorway and smiled. That smile that still caught him off guard after 50 years. That smile that said home and forever and everything that mattered. About time, she said, and food's getting cold. Sorry, was telling the boy the story. The story. She nodded, understood. Then he's ready. Thomas looked between them. Ready for what? Ready to carry it forward, Ethan said. The story, the lesson, the truth about what it means to stand when everything says run, about what it means to open the door when someone knocks, about what it means to fight for something bigger than yourself. I don't understand. Catherine stood, came over, took Thomas's face in her hands the way she'd taken Ethan's 50 years ago. Rough palms, gentle touch, all the love in the world. You will, baby. When the time comes, you will. She kissed his forehead. Now sit, eat, be with your family while you can. Because tomorrow you start your own story, your own journey. And we want you to remember where you came from. We want you to remember who you are. A Blackwood, and Blackwoods stand. Always. They ate together, the whole impossible family. Children of children, all of them existing because of one scream in a blizzard, one door opening, one moment of choice that changed everything. After dinner, Ethan and Catherine stood on the porch one last time, looking out over the valley, over the life they'd built, over 50 years of love and work and family. Remember that night, Catherine asked softly, the storm every day. I was so scared. I was so lonely. And now, he looked at their family through the window. 40 people, 40 lives, 4 generations, all of it stemming from one moment, one choice, one door opened. Now I'm grateful, he said, for the storm, for you, for all of it, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, because they led us here, to this, to everything that mattered. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Ethan Blackwood. Loved you from the moment you answered my scream. Loved you when you opened that door. Love you still. I love you, Catherine Blackwood. Loved you from the moment you refused to quit. Loved you when you kept fighting. Love you still. Love you always. Behind them, a small voice. Grace's granddaughter, also named Mary, also 6 years old, also wild and curious and full of life. Grandma, Grandpa, Great-Great-Grandma May caught another frog, and she wants to show you. Catherine laughed, rich and warm and full. That girl is exactly like her great-grandmother. God help us all. They turned to face their family. Ethan's legs still hurt. Catherine's hands still ached. They were old. They were tired. But they were together. And they were home. Behind them, the mountain rose eternal. The same mountain that had sheltered a broken man. That had tested a desperate mother. That had witnessed a love story no one expected and everyone remembered. And somewhere in the wind, if you listen closely, you could almost hear it. The echo of a woman's scream in a blizzard. The creak of a door opening. The words that changed everything. Please, I can cook. 3 words. 1 moment. A lifetime of love. That was the story of Ethan and Catherine Blackwood. That was the story of how a lonely man opened his door and found his family. That was the story of 7 children who walked through fire and came out stronger. That was the story of love, real love, the kind that doesn't care about size or shape or what the world thinks you deserve, the kind that lasts, the kind that builds, the kind that matters. And it was a story that would be told for generations, passed down from parent to child. A reminder that hope exists even in the darkest storms, that home is not a place but a choice, that courage is not the absence of fear but standing anyway, that the best things in life often come knocking when you least expect them. All you have to do is open the door. The stars came out over Blackwood Ridge, the same stars that had watched a hermit become a husband, a widow become a wife, 7 orphans become a family. Inside the house, laughter rang out. Someone was telling the story again. Someone was always telling the story. Thomas sat among his cousins listening, learning, preparing for his own journey into darkness. But now he knew. Now he understood. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing anyway. It was finding something bigger than yourself. It was opening the door when someone knocked, even when everything said to keep it closed. He would carry that lesson to Korea, would stand when everything said run, would remember that he came from people who refused to quit, who screamed into storms, who opened doors, who loved fiercely and completely and without reservation. That was his legacy. That was his strength. And it would be enough. It would have to be become, because that's what Blackwoods did. They stood, they fought, they loved, and they always opened the door.